Iroko Post Media Group Inc., in association with Iroko Post TV, invites you to the definitive debate of the 2023 presidential election season. Non-partisan Nigerian journalists Sonala Olumense, Okendebe, Farouk Berogi, and Rudolph Okonkwo, with nearly 200 years of combined experience in the profession, are pleased to invite you to the definitive presidential debate of 2023. Date: Sunday, February 19, 2023 at 6 p.m. Nigerian time, noon in New York, 7 p.m. in South Africa, 4 a.m. in Australia. The program will be televised in and outside Nigeria and carried live on all social media platforms. Here are the presidential candidates invited. All Progressives Congress Party's Bola Tinubu, People's Democratic Party's Atiku Abubakar, Labour Party's Peter Obi, New Nigeria People's Party's Rabiu Kwankwaso, Social Democratic Party's Adewale Adebayo, Action Alliance's Hamza Al-Mustafa, African Action Congress's Omoyele Sowore, African Democratic Congress's Dumebi Kachiku, and People's Redemption Party's Kola Abiola. Media partners for the debate include The Cable, Premium Times, Sahara Reporters, People's Gazette, Classic FM Radio, Ikenga Online, Authority Newspaper, Neptune Prime, Enugu Metro, Sandiata Post, Urban FM Enugu, Abuja FM, The Beat FM, Nigeria FM, Lagos Talks, Blueprint Newspaper, Roots TV. Several TV stations and social media platforms will televise the debate. Please join us.
Good afternoon from New York City. My name is Rudolph Okonkwo of Iroko Post TV. Welcome to the definitive presidential debate of 2023. This is the last of the debates for the presidential election taking place on Saturday, February 25th, 2023. This debate is brought to you by Iroko Post Media Group Inc., in association with Iroko Post TV and in partnership with over a dozen media organizations across Nigeria. Your moderators for today's debate are seasoned, non-partisan Nigerian journalists in America. The first is the great syndicated columnist, Sonala Olumense. Sonala has been a journalist since 1979. He's probably the only journalist still practicing today who interviewed Nigeria's founding statesman, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Also moderating today is Professor Kendebe. Oke is a writer, professor, and podcaster. He has over 40 years experience in journalism in Nigeria and in America. And last but not the least is Professor Farouk Berogi. Professor Berogi is a professor of journalism in the United States. He's also a blogger and writes a popular column for the Tribune newspaper and People's Gazette. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I will now hand over to the great Sonala to lead us in this program.
Thank you very much, Rudolph. Of the 9 presidential candidates invited to this debate, only a few accepted our invitation. 3 to be precise, and 2 of them are here in the studio with us as we start. By their presence today, these candidates honor the Nigerian people whom they seek to serve as president. For the process, we believe that their presence here has wonderful implications, and we thank them for being here. Immediately after the debate with them, we shall discuss with the Nigerian people the importance of these debates in a democracy and the need to insist that all those who seek to govern subject themselves to the scrutiny of the people they wish to serve. We believe that an electoral candidate who shuns political debates does far more than disrespect the voter. He shows disdain for democracy itself. That said, we will now engage the candidates who are here with us. Here is Professor Ndebe to introduce them.
Thank you very much, Sonala, and thank you, Rudolph, and thank you, Farouk. It's such a delight to co-moderate this really important event. It's my pleasure to welcome to the stage the presidential candidates who are joining us in this live debate. First, I'd like to welcome Prince Adewale Adebayo, the presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party. And finally, Mr. Dumebi Kachukwu, the presidential candidate of the African Democratic Congress. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the debate. You have agreed to certain guidelines for this debate. And so now I'm going to invite both of you to take 2 minutes to make 2 minutes each to make an opening statement. I'll invite Prince Adebayo to please start. You have to unmute.
Good evening. Sorry, I'm adjusting my visual here and there. That's because of some technical issues. Now, why am I here? I'm here basically for 3 reasons. Nigerians need an alternative. Nigerians say they need an alternative. And Nigerians deserve an alternative. The narrative of how to grab power in Nigeria, because it's about state capture. Everything I have seen since 1999 has been an attempt by groups of elites to gang up together and grab all the institutions of state and appropriate all the resources of the state to themselves. And every other thing you see are side shows to either retain what they've captured or to snatch from one another what they desire to capture. And the Nigerian people came in as victims, unaware, and things like that. Elections were not even properly conducted. Elections were rigged and all the rest of it. Now, Nigerians as victims are transforming to being accomplices by lying down, pretending that they don't know how to change their situation. And one of the things they say is that, well, there's no alternative. Why are the alternatives not coming out? So I decided that, okay, I will do this experiment. I'll provide an alternative, not only an alternative person in my person, an alternative platform, and an alternative framework for doing politics. And the alternative as a person is that I'm not part, you cannot say I'm part of the ruinous past or those who have given you any problems. 2, the alternative platform is that I brought a consensus based on Chapter 2 of our Constitution. It's something all of us agree legally to be bound by. So let me not create a consensus arising from just my own thoughts. Let me create consensus that we ordinarily should agree with. 3, to create an alternative platform for politics, which doesn't include lying, mudslinging, ethnicity, religion, or any form of sharp practices, or the use of excessive use of money. So if we create these platforms, then we'll have been able to separate those who are actual victims from those who are collaborators, and we'll see how people react. But the vision is that we must be able to eradicate poverty and insecurity in our country and establish an accountable government for the people. It doesn't mean that if we do have these, we will not have challenges, but we will actually be on a genuine path to a place we say we are going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Mr. Dumebi Kachukwu to please make an opening statement for 2 minutes.
Distinguished moderators, my fellow Nigerians, thanks for having me on here this evening. Nigeria is at a defining moment. You have described as geographical expression, have an opportunity now to create a nation that works for everyone. In the last 8 years of the Buhari administration, Nigeria has systematically failed. Every index known to developments, Nigeria has failed. We can no longer keep on complaining. This is the time for us to now take our country forward. I chose to run for the highest office in the land because I believe that the president of Nigeria needs to be someone who can, first of all, identify our problems, understand our problems, and be able to manage the manpower to solve our problems. The greatest threat we have as we go into these elections is the fact that we are further divided by tribe, tongue, and religion. We need to do away with this. In the next few days, we have seen divisive elements come into our body polity who seek to further divide us along tribe, tongue, and religion. I run as a candidate who wants to take Nigeria beyond these divisive concepts that have taken us and have almost destroyed our country. We need to start rebuilding our country. We need to start protecting our nation. We need to start supporting the weak, the elderly, the women in our country. We need to rebuild our economy from ground up. We need to start define a charter that works for everyone. We need to have a nation that protects everyone, irrespective of where he or she may come from. We need to start building an economy that supports our thronging youths, our millions of unemployed youths. We need to start creating industries. We need to start creating an enabling environment for people who have the wherewithal, who have the willingness to work to thrive. We need to start recreating an environment where our middle class no longer seek to leave Nigeria and build other countries, but they can stay here and work in a peaceful and a conducive environment to build Nigeria. I say to Nigerians today, as we have these conversations, this election should never be defined along political lines about those who have the chance or the parties who can win elections. It's about the people who have the capability to drive Nigeria in a different direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now invite my co-moderator, Farouk Berogi, to open up with questions.
Thank you. This is Farouk Berogi, and I want to start this session with a broad question on the economy. There seems to be a coalescence of sentiments around the idea that fuel subsidy should be done away with. All the presidential candidates that I have heard, from PDP to APC to Labour Party, appear united in saying that we should do away with fuel subsidies. But the discussions often ignore the fact that Nigeria is a petrol-dependent economy, and that what usually passes for taking away fuel subsidy is a hike in the prices of petroleum. And we know the consequences this has on the economy, on everyday people. So I want to ask each and every one of you here to talk about your ideas about fuel subsidy. Are you going to take away fuel subsidy if you have the opportunity to rule Nigeria? If yes, what is the model that inspires that? Because even in the United States here, the patron saints of capitalism, petrol consumption is subsidized, agriculture is subsidized. So I want to know what inspires you to think that we can run an economy that does not subsidize consumption of something as consequential as petrol in Nigeria?
Which candidate? Shall we say, how about you start, Mr. Kachukwu, and then we'll go to Prince Adebayo.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The question has never been about the relevance of fuel subsidy. The challenge we've had as a country is the fact that this has been a gaping hole where a few briefcase billionaires have used to siphon billions of naira from our country. Our law enforcement in the last in the last decade has not been able to put a stop to this. Rather than let a whole nation continue to pay for the crimes of a few people, most people now advocate for the removal of fuel subsidy, and so that they can put the gains in a transparent process that benefits most Nigerians. So if I were to remove fuel subsidy, I'll put what we gain into social infrastructure like transportation, education, healthcare, and what have you. The Jonathan government, when they tried to remove fuel subsidy, we saw them bringing in a lot of buses, trying to ramp up the development of our rail system. But Nigerians didn't buy into that at that time, and we had a lot of protest. We still see the same problems today. What they had experienced then is what we still experience today. We speak about fuel subsidy, but we have disparate pricing across Nigeria. What we pay for fuel in Lagos is not what they pay in Adamawa or in Port Harcourt or in Aba. So because we have disparate pricing across the country, we know that subsidy is not uniform. Some people are paying more for this price, for this petrol price. So if we still have this problem in an import-dependent economy, in an oil-producing nation, we need to start looking at mechanisms that we can use to solve this problem. We then need to go away from PMS and start looking at alternative sources of energy like CNG or PNG or whatever. We need to start looking at the gases, okay, to power our vehicles. We then also need to start bringing in more refineries. We've spoken about refineries for too long in Nigeria, and one begins to wonder, is refining a rocket science? Nations that don't produce oil are importing crude oil and they are refining. How does it make sense that a country like Nigeria that produces crude oil, that we can't refine petroleum products? But let me tell you one of the biggest challenges. Every year, we have almost 100 billion naira, they say, that goes into the refineries. They still don't work, but nobody has paid any price. We've not seen anybody charged to cut. And because of this, because this becomes a pipe that they used to siphon funds, nothing happens. So we need to plug those holes. While we accept that we need to protect our people, we also know that we cannot continue leaving a few briefcase billionaires to continue to ruin our nation. In the last 1 year, we saw the liberalization of AGO and aviation fuel. We are dealing with it. We've plugged that loophole. For PMS, we need more time to do this so we can put in place the social infrastructure that will support our people when we take this out.
I guess the same question for Prince Adebayo.
Yeah. Okay, let me start by saying that fuel subsidy is a metaphor for how the elite of Nigeria deodorize and beautify criminality. And the most dangerous part of the elite are those who provide the language to mollify grand looting as if it were a government policy. Even the way the question is framed in favor of those who are just economic bandits in the country. Number one, fuel subsidy is not the beginning. What is happening in Nigeria is like a government that guarantees a steady supply of mosquitoes into your bedroom, but is debating whether they should increase or lower the price of prophylactics for malaria. But if they just stop supplying mosquitoes, they will be able to take care of themselves. Number one, we have refineries that can refine 450 million barrels a day for local use and regional export. The thing that they've discovered is that if they capture the 450 million barrels, they can do whatever they like with it, make a swap with it, make it disappear, and not the rest of it. Because it's not everyone who has the energy to go to the creek and steal from the pipeline outrightly. Some just want to steal from the official one. So for that reason, the refineries have been put under disrepair. But those who are in charge of spending money to maintain refineries at the cost center will not let go of that subhead. So that money is still being paid in the name of turnaround maintenance and other endless contracts. So the 450 million barrels, which we decided to refine locally, is what they've gone into all sorts of arrangements into swap. Now, after doing that, another problem occurred. And that problem is that more people who discovered that there's lazy way to make money, and especially easy way to give politicians money. So don't be surprised if I'm elected president today, the first set of people after recovering from the heart attack of me being elected, the first set of people to be offering money, private jet, all of this will include those who benefit from this subsidy. They will tell you the easiest way for the first lady to get $10 million without working. So that is what is happening. So the end result of it is that, one, the consumption for the domestic consumption, it doesn't matter how the GDP goes up or down or whatever, 70 million liters are said to be consumed daily. The figures change according to the degree of desperation of the person giving the figure. But the bottom line is that the debate that is being framed to the public is whether you should subsidize fuel for the poor or not. And either way you answer that question, you are falling victim of their syllogism. Number one, we don't need to subsidize petrol by importing. The best ways to subsidize petrol is by local production. If you want to subsidize something, a long-lasting way for your people is to give internal capacity to produce it. So the first thing to do is to give internal capacity to produce our own domestic consumption. One, by making sure that the 4 refineries work, 2 in Port Harcourt, 1 in Warri, 1 in Kaduna, and they could work under an O&M contract anytime. Secondly, technology has improved now for refining products. So with a cracker on a modular refinery, you should be able, in 18 months, even some of them, you can wheel them across the sea. So you should be able to put about 20, even if you lease them, they will start producing enough for you. Thirdly, we need to understand that people use petrol for the least important of our productivity. We use it to move around. Like yesterday, as I was roaming about spreading my message, I was using petrol in my cars. However, the food I ate, the clothes I wore, everything else is powered by diesel. Vehicles that carry most of these things are on diesel. The power that generates in my house, other people's houses, is either diesel. In my own case, I use solar, but most people use diesel. And this diesel is not part of the discussion of subsidy. So to summarize this crime into a government policy, so one, I will make sure that domestic refineries work. If they work, this question goes away. Second, I will ensure that public transportation is done on gas. I'm sure that Farouk will know that in Atlanta, Marta runs his buses on natural gas. And with a Marta card, you can always, if you are old, if you're a public servant, whatever you are, once you have a Marta card, you can actually use the card. And they don't care about the price of petrol. So those are the things we need to do in our cities to make sure that if you're a public servant, if you are a student, if you are employed, it's part of your right to have a card. And CNG buses, there are so many of them, I know where they are in various warehouses. Canada alone, if you can tropicalize some of their own, they will send it to you. It's all over the world. We can do that quickly. And we have converters that can easily be installed. So what I will do is to make sure that I remove petrol from the discussion completely by building a refinery and by making sure that public transportation does not depend on it. And at the end of the day, this issue of subsidy will not even arise at all.
Can I come a little bit here? I think there's a fusion of 2 distinct issues. One is corruption in subsidy administration and the notion of subsidy itself. I like Prince Adebayo's response, but it's more futuristic. Now I'm saying, as it is right now, the refineries are not working, and it's not possible to get them to work in the next few months. Let's start there. Do you think that there is merit in taking and tackling corruption and ensuring that subsidy gets to who it deserves to go to? Because when discussions on subsidy always ignore the subsidies that sustain the libertarian lifestyles of the elite. There's way more money spent in sustaining the elites, in subsidizing subsidizing lifestyles of the elite than in ensuring that petrol prices or gas prices are within reasonable limits so that they don't affect transportation costs, which affect the prices of commodities in the market. So there's a domino effect when the cost of petrol is high. Although it does not power food, it powers so many other things that determine prices. And that affects the lives of the people. So corruption is one thing. And I get it, that we should not enrich a few fat cats in the name of subsidizing petroleum products. But the debate has moved in a completely different direction, which is that subsidy is evil. It should be done away with. And that is where I want us, well, that's the problem that I want us to address. Where do you stand when it comes to subsidizing the life, of everyday people who are exposed to the elements, who need help? And the idea that people don't need help has no basis in any system of governance that I've ever known. I live in the United States here, the patron saint of capitalism, the belly of the beast. No one says you should not subsidize petroleum products. Petroleum products are subsidized right here. As I'm talking to you in Georgia, we pay way less than most people do in other parts of the state. How do they subsidize it? Gas tax holidays. The federal government, that is done as well. So that's the debate I want us to have to face.
You see, when you're running a government, you are trying to solve actual problems of the people. In the course of that, there are 1,000 debates people want to get you into. You decide, if you are running a proper government, you decide which debate you want to get into. There's a debate, some debates are just straw man debates. A straw man debate, you just go into it. Whether you win or not, the person who is committing the crime is escaping. One, if we are talking of subsidy, petroleum subsidy is not the biggest subsidy. For 1.something trillion that we are shouting about, naira for subsidy, we have 16 trillion in industrial subsidies that don't produce any productivity, wafers and all of those things. So there are a lot of subsidies. So once I come into government, number one, the corruption side goes away. Because you could see that's why I'm running a shoestring budget. That's why I'm not doing live streaming, any of these things. That you can't trace the money of any of these people to my campaign. That's number one. So once we come in, the subsidy guys, majority of what is contained there is the fraud. Majority. It's not like 10%. You can ignore 10% fraud, 20% fraud should not even be ignored. But if you are powerless, you can ignore that. But you cannot ignore 75% fraud. That's what I'm letting you know. So the first thing, once I come in, I will verify there's no MD Rudolph that has not sailed into West Africa in about 13 years that would end up collecting money for supplying to Atlas Cove. And there is a non-existent MV Farouk. There's no ship called MV Farouk, but we are paying for it. So that one we can end immediately. It's not futuristic. We come in, if we can survive, we can run a stable government that can survive all the backlash, the media that they will hire and give money to, and also the riots they will put on the street. We can immediately stop that fraudulent part of it. And they can go to the corrupt judges in the High Court and get a High Court order that they have a contract, they have to pay them. If we can survive all of that, we will stop majority of the money going to fraudulent hands without even announcing any policy on subsidy at all. Secondly, if we can get NNPC has gone into some complicated contracts, which I want you to understand. There are a lot of complicated contracts that NNPC has gone into over this swap, which whether or not you even receive these petroleum products, you already have it to pay. You cannot just terminate because they've tied our hand in many ways. But what I'm letting you know is that I will systematically, without even making any changes to this issue of subsidy, one, I will remove the 16 trillion. That's why you see a lot of big men will start to check themselves into psychiatric hospital. I will remove 16 trillion that we don't put in our budget, that we give to so-called industrialists who don't industrialize anywhere. If I do that and do other checks, the money being spent on subsidy, about 1% trillion, will not be my priority. It's at number 7 in my list of things which I need to eliminate. But I will eliminate in a way that it won't affect the pricing of petroleum in the market.
Okay. Do maybe have have any response to that?
Okay. I believe Farouk. Yes. Can you hear me?
It
You're going
breaks.
in and out. Yeah.
It breaks.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, now.
Okay, is it better? Is it better now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
If you want to subsidize,
able to hear me?
revolution,
We
if
can
you want to
hear you.
subsidize
Yes.
revolution, Showore is here.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can
we
hear
can
you.
hear you.
Rudolph, I think he has some technical difficulties. I think we should move on because of
Yes.
Yeah.
when he
Okay.
reconnects, we can go back to him.
Okay. All right. So
Are you able to hear me?
yes.
Yeah, we can hear
Yes.
you.
We can hear you.
For 1
doesn't-
minute, yes.
Can hear us.
Okay, great. Okay, I was just going to say on subsidy, I think Farouk's question still remains, is subsidy relevant or not? We are not doubting or disagreeing that subsidy is relevant. But in a nation that is fantastically corrupt, where we have seen that law enforcement has not been able to stem or do anything about the corruption in the subsidy process, that's why we are looking at taking out subsidy, even though it's going to cost us a lot in terms of how it affects the poor. If you look at the structure of NMPC today, how will I want to tackle the fraud that is going on there if we are liberalizing the sector, right? And you have people being able to bring in products. If government wants to subsidize the products, you subsidize at source. That's at the point they come into the country. But if you see what happened 10 years ago, we had disparate records about the vessels that came in. Even the multinational companies that manage our ports were implicated in that process. So we have looked at this and said, because our people, the process is so corrupt, that's why we need to do away with this. Do away with this completely, take that money and start seeing how we can support those who really need that subsidy. You mentioned that there's subsidy in transportation process in system in America. That's why we said that if we have social systems like that, we need to subsidize those processes instead of subsidizing the people who are importing, inflating the figures and taking away billions of naira. But yes, subsidy is absolutely relevant. If you know the price or how the removal of subsidy in diesel or in aviation fuel has affected Nigeria, nobody speaks about that. Now you have big men, a lot of people who use diesel generators are going using this fireman petrol generator, it's making noise all over the place and polluting the environment. But it's a big cost on our industries and it's affecting Nigeria greatly. And this is because we are not able to manage the corruption. If we say dedicate personnel, dedicate manpower, and use technology and processes to face or tackle the corruption, how long before we get there? This is what we are faced. No matter the person we bring into EFCC, ICPC, and the police and what have you, they have been unable to combat this multi-billion-dollar fraud that goes on there. This is why we say, take away this money and let's reinvest this money into other areas that we can at least see that it's getting to the right people who need it.
Thank you very much. It's my delight to welcome Omoyele Sowore, the presidential candidate of the African Action Congress. Mr. Sowore, you're welcome to the debate. So I don't know, Farouk, if you have another question, or are we going to another section?
Yeah, I think we should move to the next, except Sowore wants to jump in and share his thoughts on
petroleum,
on petroleum
subsidy.
On subsidy as a concept, not how it's implemented in Nigeria. He's muted.
Oh, that's sure.
Sowore is muted.
Mhm.
All right, go ahead,
Well,
Shawara.
if Shawara, if the presidential candidate of the AAC is going to intervene at this point, given that he has arrived a little late, we're going to limit his time. Shawara, you would have about 1 minute on this one, on this question of petroleum subsidy.
Thank you. My position is based on facts with regards to petroleum subsidy. And after 2012, we found out that the idea itself is a scam. And this was simple. There was a protest in Nigeria, well, I would say globally, against the Jonathan regime regarding petroleum subsidy. And when the protest was over, they came around and said they have found out that it's a scam and actually arrested people. Uh, well, they started prosecuting them, and I can tell you nobody was ever jailed for that scam. And one of the things we found out about petroleum subsidy was that most of the people who were importing fuel weren't really importing fuel. Some of them, and that was the most dramatic of it all, said they were importing fuel in a vehicle that has sank 20 years before. Yes, that was what we found out in those days. And it's the same way I feel today that they are not subsidizing subsidy. And it has even got official. The Nigerian Customs Service, NCS, said they have not been able to verify that Nigerians are consuming 61 million, I think, liters of fuel. They confronted the NNPC with it, and the NNPC has not denied it. The second aspect of it, which I'll quickly round up, is that as of yesterday, the NNPC is now saying that even though over 6 trillion naira was budgeted for petroleum subsidy, the Nigerian government doesn't pay for it. So they deduct, according to the GMD of NNPC, now with a limited liability company, that they are the ones doing the deduction. The government budgets for it, but they don't pay them. And that's the basis for them not remitting a dime into the federation account from the NNPC. That's where we are. All of this is a scam until we're able to find out that there's something being properly subsidized. I don't believe there's a subsidy of petroleum products.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to do the next section, and the next section is going to be education. Nigerian lecturers basically on Valentine's Day, February 14 of 2022, started a strike. And that strike lasted for exactly 8 months. This is a familiar experience in the experience of a familiar phenomenon in the experience of Nigerian students. So the question that I have for the three candidates, and I'll like Mr. Shawara to begin, is what do you see as the central problems in the country's educational sector? And as succinctly as possible, what kind of policy prescriptions would you have to address those problems?
Well, there are two things involved. One is funding for public education, but I also think it must be clearly stated that the problem with public education is not limited to tertiary institutions. There are over 20 million kids who are out of school, primary and secondary schools. And there's also a question of how many students do you have in tertiary institutions? When we did our research, we found out there are 1.7 million students who are students in tertiary institutions. And this spread across both public tertiary institutions and private. So if you look at what is in the public, we're talking about almost 1 million students, and there are about 700,000 students in private institutions. So it's a question of funding. And when I was a student leader in the 90s, the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian Universities were asking for 1.9 billion naira just so that they can take care of all the needs in federal institutions in our days. And this was around 1992, 1993. Yes. The money was never made available to them. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was wondering, could you, because in the interest of time, if you can frame your responses within 1 minute, please.
All right. So, and I don't know why Prince has a Iroko Post TV on his. That's is it working for Rudolph?
You know, you have to have a plan B. In case this election goes against your wish, you have a plan B.
He's also a publisher. I don't know, maybe they have the relations. Maybe Prince wants to run out of Nigeria after the elections. We have to be
All right. So I'd like to invite. Yes, I'd like to invite Mr. Kachukwu actually to respond to that question quite very briefly. What you define as the central problems of education in Nigeria and your solutions.
Okay, I think that the major challenge we have with education in Nigeria is that we have not redefined education for the modern day, and we have not redefined education for the future that we want for Nigeria. When China decided that they wanted to be an industrial giant, they had to redefine education to support their vision. We don't have a vision that we've tied our education charter to, and that's one of the greatest challenges. You started by talking about the ASU strike. Yes, the ASU strike had its merits on both sides, but one of the greatest challenges you have within the educational sector is the fact that those who lead us, those who manage our processes, there's a huge disconnect. So what will I do as a solution, right? We need to ensure that those who lead us actually feel the pains of those who they lead. I long proposed Nigerian Patriot Act, which simply states that public officials, those directors of companies that derive their operating license from government, their families, their children, they must all go to public schools. They must not use generators in their houses. They must not have boreholes in their houses. They must travel by road unless it's an emergency. Now, if we can make those who lead us feel what the poor man feels or experiences, what will happen is that as Nigerians, we will all come together and within a short time ensure that we are properly funding key sectors or solving the problems in those sectors. Finally, in education, we have this notion in Nigeria that education must be funded by government. No, those of you who are based in America, you understand that education is funded by private parties also. Their endowments, grants, and what have you. What are our rich doing to support the educational sector? During the Jonathan government, I proposed then that if you take all the senatorial districts, look at all the institutions we have there and identify all their big men in that district, come up with the requirements that they need there, be it IT infrastructure, be it schools and what have you, reduce it into a plan and a budget and get these people to fund in addition to what government is doing. Then you begin to see something that is working in that sector.
Thank you very much. Prince Adebayo, please, the same question.
Okay, thank you. Like I'm always looking at this way we frame our questions in Nigeria. And like I said in the metaphor regarding mosquitoes, when it comes to our education, it's like we are debating not how to heal the patient who has malaria, but how to regulate the temperature of patients of malaria. Yeah, so that's what we discuss. We don't discuss educational policy. We discuss industrial relations in the tertiary institutions. That's all, ASU. That's not the problem. ASU is a symptom of a bigger problem. The bigger problem in Nigeria is that we have no government in place. What we call government is not a government. When you run a government properly, and you make social investment, and you give educational sector the requisite minimum investment that you need to give, you have accountability and clear freedom from at least an attempt to reduce corruption to the minimum, and you let the universities have their autonomy. ASU will not go on strike. I know ASU members, they are not crazy people. They love the job. The reason why they are there in the first place is because they love the job. They have alternatives. So the problem is that the government is not a government. Government is anti-education. So what we will do, once you elect a proper government, an SDP government, the first thing we do is that we give education its due in the proper appropriation. Remember, because we are not involved in subsidy scam, we're not involved in the criminality, called waivers and all of that, we will bring a lot of money to the covers. That's number one. Two, we will ensure that universities have proper autonomy. And that is intellectual autonomy, because you have to ensure that the governing council of university is not for those who fail to become governor or fail to become senators. You just put them there. They have people who know about education and who can run the university system clearly. The issue of remuneration of university officials is a comprehensive thing. The idea is that it is an oxymoron to have a university lecturer who is poor. They belong to the upper middle class, and the purchasing power of their salary should be such that they can live a very comfortable life free from worries and other that would push them in sharp practices they can concentrate. So to have a more organic approach to our educational system is that we will have, for the first time, a reasonable autonomy for the universities, heavy investment in social sector education. For example, to discuss the salary of lecturers without tying it to possession power, without tying it to the living condition, without tying to other amenities which you require to function as an upper middle class professor or senior lecturer, is not complete. Fourthly, we have to deal with the issue of the fact that the lecturers are tired of lying. The ASU strike is bad, but it's not the worst. The worst is giving somebody a degree in chemistry who cannot titrate, giving somebody a degree in computer science who doesn't have even a computer set. So this is what the university wants us to address, and they're easy to address. If you take 10% of the money that EFCC claims that it has been seizing, if you put that money as special fund into education, all of these things will disappear. And I can tell you, one thing I will conclude this component with is that, one, if we run away from every social program on the basis that they can be abused, if you remove subsidy because there's corruption in it, but you don't tackle the corruption, almost every government program will fail. Because whether it is...
Could we leave it there?
Yes.
Could we leave, because we're running short on time. I'd like to, if you don't mind, put in another quick question on education, all right? And I'd like to start with you again, Mr. Sowore. Late last year, the federal government came out with a policy of mother tongue education, especially beginning in the primary schools. The idea is that it's important for kids to internalize and understand concepts in their mother tongue. Is this a policy that you will support? And if so, if not, why not?
Well, you cannot have mother tongue education without mother tongue instructions. I often refer to the haste by Nigerians to translate the Bible into local languages. There are 70 local language Bibles in Nigeria, but there's not a single physics book written in Yoruba language, or a geography book written in Robo, or a chemistry book that's written in Hausa. So you have to first and foremost address the issue of instructions, because what drives any form of education is that if the method of instruction was written down in that language that you want to teach people in. So first and foremost, we must address that. If you don't have a computer book that says, hey, this is what you call algorithm in Hausa or Yoruba or Robo or Ibibio, you can't just force people to do mother language education. That has to be addressed. The issue of curriculum must first of all be addressed. I can guarantee you they'll find people who can write a computer book or a physics book in Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, and then we can then say, look, we go and teach people in mother language. You can find, you can find this in Kenya. instructional materials that are written in the Kenyan language.
Kikuyu.
You can find it in
And
other places.
Swahili.
You can find it in Russia, Swahili. You can find it written in Japanese. You find it written in Chinese, but you don't have any of these subjects. And not even a Yoruba book these days, they will put at the back of it, published by Macmillan.
Thank you.
It's not written in any
Yeah.
Yoruba.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kachuku, could you please, as briefly as possible?
Yeah, it's very simple. While it seems to make sense, on the other hand, in terms of implementation, it doesn't make sense. How do you protect the minority languages in a nation like Nigeria that has a lot of languages? How do you decide that you are going to go with 3 main languages, Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba? What happens to this feeling that ethnic minorities still continue to have in Nigeria, where we seem to say they don't exist or they are invisible to us? So when we look at that, and that's one of the reasons why English has been chosen in Nigeria as a national language of some sort. I think going back now, trying to revisit or bring up this issue of languages in instruction in our educational system, and then the time it takes you to tutor the instructors in those languages and dealing with all the languages. How do you deal with which language you will use and what have you? I believe that we should focus our energies in dealing with the vision we have for education in this modern age.
Thank you very much. Mr. Prince Adebayo, please, briefly.
Well, I can say that it's a fallacy of false dilemma. You can do all of the above. There's no problem with that. You can be fluent in English, which we require. It's the business language in the world. And one of the few advantages we have anywhere we go in the business world is that we speak English. Hopefully, we'll continue to speak better English with the generation that we're raising now. Second, that we don't lose our indigenous languages as well. And for someone like me, you am required to be fluent not only in English, I will be fluent in Yoruba, I should be fluent in Ondo language, I should be fluent in Arabic as well, because I have some Islamic tradition in our family. And I also should be also fluent in French. So anything. The important thing is that we cannot centrally control everything. Raise the quality of education, put education on the concurrent list where it is now, and everybody. So you discover that Zamfara State gives you somebody who's fluent in physics, in Arabic. That's not a problem. Somebody who wants to use NCBD, even if they want to bring it back to learn calculus, there's no problem. The important thing is that the school must run, teachers must be there, and because we are diverse in this country, we have enough. There was time I was doing something for the Moroccan government. They said their best Arabic translator was a man from Ilorin. So, there's no problem. We are over controlling everything.
Yeah,
let's raise the quality and the standard. That's all.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over the baton to my great colleague, Sonalo Olumese.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we are running out of time, so I'm going to appeal to the candidates to be even briefer in their responses to this. This segment is about multidimensional poverty in Nigeria. We've become the poverty capital of the world, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2063 of the African Union both regard this problem of poverty and inequality very highly. My question to each of you, beginning with Adebayo, is this: what will you do and how will you make sure that your response or proposed response to this question of poverty and inequality works?
The question is for who?
We're beginning with you. How will you respond to the question of poverty and inequality?
As you know, sir, I'm the only one running on farewell to poverty and insecurity as my slogan, as my message. And Nigeria being poor, I'm not surprised that we're the poverty capital of the world. We're the corruption capital of the world. We're the robbery capital of the world. So people have been robbed of their entitlement for 60 years. They are bound to be poor. But the good thing is that poverty can leave this generation by, one, stopping the robbery, making investment in social sector, making sure that we invest in agriculture, we invest in things that make people poor, housing, we invest in generating full employment. There's a way I can rewrite the current budget when we come in. If we rewrite the current budget and you take the procurement away and rewrite it, we will be able to lift at least 60 million people out of poverty. So the most important thing is that poverty here is not an accident. It is a government policy that it brought people to be poor. The country itself doesn't want you to be poor. Every environment. I traveled yesterday, the length that I traveled yesterday is bigger than Western Europe. And I didn't meet any government presence in Taraba, in part of Adamawa, in part of Nasarawa. So in conclusion, poverty can be programmatically reduced and eliminated in Nigeria, but you have to have good governance that is making social investment in things that make people poor. And that is very clear. If you don't do it, you can be part of the statistics for World Bank or anybody forever.
Mr. Kachiku, please, 1 minute.
I believe that Nigeria is running out of time on how to deal with the poor in Nigeria. I believe that we have less than 6 months to deal with the poverty rate we have in Nigeria before Nigeria begins to implode. How do we deal with poverty? First of all, government has to begin to understand that government has to provide an enabling environment for all her citizenry to thrive. That's the role of government. If we understand that, government has to now begin to look at all our assets and how to activate those assets so that Nigerians can build upon the assets as a foundation for them to thrive in the year 2023. It will interest you to know that we still in this year continue to export raw materials to other nations, whereas what we ought to be doing to create jobs in Nigeria is for us to ensure that those companies that need those raw materials, they should come into Nigeria and produce and manufacture in Nigeria. If we look at the service-based industries where we see Nigerians are thriving, like artists and what have you, what is government really doing to build platforms like Fiverr, Freelancer, and what have you, so that people can stay at home with good broadband service and export their skill sets all over the world? What are we doing with tourism? Our big men leave Nigeria to Miami, the Caribbean, and what have you, for the same water that we have passing Echo here. There are so many areas that we can use to begin to create employment for our unemployed so that we can start helping our people. And then we need to start looking at how to support our weak, our poor, our elderly, our youths. We need to start looking at, when we speak about subsidy, beyond subsidy, we need to start putting social systems to help these people get through this trying period.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Sowore, you have the last remarks on this subject. Then I'm going to go to Farouk, who's supposed to be handling our next segment, so that maybe he can combine both your next remarks, and our closing segment together.
Okay. Oh, you want me to ask the question?
We're going to be handling the segment on security. I was wondering if you would combine that with the closing remarks, so that what Mr. Sowore says next concerning poverty will be combined with the closing remarks he will be making anyway. Can we do that?
Okay, so you want me to proceed to ask the question on security? Yes. Or
no, the question has been asked. I guess we're inviting Sowore to answer that question, but also to build in his closing remarks,
yes.
into that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Chief Sowore.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the solution is very direct. In a country where they talk about multidimensional poverty, there's also multidimensional wealth. But the question is, how do you manage and how do you redistribute this wealth? I had an argument in a studio, a Rice TV studio in Lagos, with a PDP spokesperson for Atiku today. And he was telling me that, the problem with Nigeria is that when you have 100,000 people, 100,000 naira, you can either share it with two people who have 500,000 each, or you can share it with 100 persons who gets 10,000 each. And you discover that when you give 10,000 each to 100 people, you have a more progressive society, you have a prosperous society than when you give it to two people. So their direct, response to how to deal with distribution of wealth is to give it to two people, and for the two people to now be sharing it with whomever they like. Look at what they are doing now with the so-called naira redesign. It was a policy that was meant, to grab power and to grab people's wealth. This is the only country in the world where you have money and you can withdraw it from a bank. Even when the physical paper was introduced, I was asking people, and this is part of our problem. We don't ask questions. Is that some 2 years before now, the central bank came out and said they were setting up e-naira. So what happened to e-naira? How do you set up e-naira first, and then you go into the bush to to fetch trees to now make paper naira again? It doesn't make sense. But they spent a lot of money on the e-naira. They said it was the best thing to happen. They're the first country in the world to introduce electronic naira. And then 2 years later, they went into the bush and fell all the trees, and they're trying to make paper naira. It doesn't make sense. That's why I agree with Prince here that
Yeah. So could you
have to
make
understand
your
that when
your
you don't
closing
have a government,
remarks?
nothing will ever work. We don't have a government, and the government here practices socialism for the rich, and then they tell the rest of the country to go and work hard. And when things don't work, they already know who to blame. They always blame the poor for not working hard enough. And like they are doing in the narrative, they tell you, oh, why are you looking for so much money? Why don't you just stay with small naira? We're trying to dispossess the rich of huge amount of money. And the Central Bank of Nigeria came out 2 days ago that the first 500 billion naira they put out into circulation were mopped up by politicians. But they said to us when they started that, we just want to make sure politicians don't have money to buy votes. And a simple question I asked them is that, so in another 4 years, are you going to change the naira so that they will have no ability to buy votes? And if you are redesigning the naira, when are you going to redesign the dollar? So that, because Nigerian politicians don't spend naira, so you also have to redesign the dollar so that they won't have enough dollars to buy, votes. So I agree totally with everybody who said we don't have a government, and we must start thinking about getting a government in place so that we can address the issue of inequality, poverty, and want in our system. And thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to ask last question on security. We know that one of the issues that dogged the Goodluck Jonathan administration, which became the basis for its ouster, was the what we thought the deepening and breadthening of insecurity. But now we've seen increased bloodshed all over the country, and it appears that every year is more insecure than the previous year. So, what policies, programs, thoughts, perspectives, insights do you guys have on how to bring about lasting security in the country? How to reverse the theaters of bloodshed that continue to envelop the country? I'm going to start with Mr. Adumebi Kachiku. Please, 1 minute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So attack security in 1 minute. Okay, first of all, we have to understand that what's going on with security stems from, one, our economic challenges, two, our divisions as a people that are based on tribe, tongue, and religion, three, the fact that we have an extremely porous border, four, we have a president whose body language seems to suggest that his kith and kin from any part of the world can waltz into our country, live in our country, take over our farmlands, and do whatever they need to do in Nigeria. If we understand all this, then we now begin to know how to tackle security. I believe that we don't have enough personnel on ground to deal with the different theaters of war we have across Nigeria. I will immediately bring on board 200,000 men and women from the civil defense and police, because they are already trained in the art of carrying weapons to complement the war effort we have now. I will then immediately go after those who come in through our borders. We need to start bringing up those walls, and we need to start using technology, drones, USVs, and UGVs to tackle the porousness of our borders. We also need to understand the role that budgeting has played in the current warfare. President Jonathan had 100 billion naira internal security budget, which President Buhari inherited, he has not increased, even though the war and the theaters of war have increased and have spread. And he's not implementing 50% of that budget. We need to fund security properly. If you remember what happened with the Kaduna train bombing, imagine a situation where you have to do about 8 sorties a day to monitor that train line. And because the cost of aviation fuel has increased, because of the cost of diesel has increased, and you're not getting enough funding, you reduce the sorties to 2 or 3 a day. The terrorists understand that you have reduced it. They know your pattern, and they attack when they know that you are not there. That's why you hear that you have 100 motorcycles and vehicles going across Nigeria with hundreds of people and nobody sees them, because we are not properly funded. We need to fund these people more. And then Nigerians need to understand that Nigeria is at war. We are one of the only nations in the world where we are at war, and most people don't actually believe we are at war until the war gets to their doorstep. If we are at war, if we understand what we are at war, the local gathering of intelligence will improve to help our security agencies. Then our security agencies need to be more coordinated. We have a non-functioning NSA now that has not helped the war effort. It just seems to exist on paper. And that's why there's no serious coordination amongst the different security agencies. Then as president of Nigeria, my body language will clearly say to all Nigerians that any Nigerian life lost will be avenged. I will go after anyone. I'll make clear to everyone that a Nigerian life is precious to me, and I will protect all Nigerian lives.
Thank you so much. Next, Prince Adewale.
Okay, let's take it clearly. Let us have an appreciation of the situation. What is happening in Nigeria, if you want to know, that Nigeria is a territory of different economic warlords, socio-political warlords. So Nigerian elite, as we call them, even though they look like us, they have the same skin with us, some of them are relatives, they are actually like drug lords who have shared the country into territory. So what you find you call insecurity is like you go to Miami in the days of cocaine trade, and warlords are fighting over territory. That's number one. So the first thing you need to do is to form a government that the warlords are not fighting over that government. That's what is happening in Nigeria, number one. And number two is that the warlords in Nigeria, some of them are representative of international concerns. So we need to take care of our national security in such a way that our land is not a territory where a militarized version of the Berlin Conference scramble for Africa. There's a scramble for Nigeria, of which Nigerian politicians and political elite are part of that. Some acting for themselves, some acting for foreign agents. Second is that the security architecture, it doesn't need funding. And I disagree with maybe in that regard. It's not the funding. They are well funded, but the funding is looting. And to say that there's no coordination, there's coordination in security. They may be coordinated by a young man who used to sell a recharge card, but it's being coordinated somewhere. And the coordination is based on appropriation and spending. If you look at the amount of money being spent off balance sheet, it's a very serious amount of money. The third issue is dealing with intelligence. The intelligence in Nigeria is all over the place. I have traveled around the country. I've been to Madagali, I've been to Baga, I've been to Mubi, I've been to the West Corridor in Niger State and all of that, further up down to Kwara and up to Kebbi. There's no part of Nigeria that I have not been to, and there's no part of Nigeria that the Nigerian Army cannot handle. But the issue is that there's a cadre, I don't want to be, maybe from course 35 upwards, they have made up their mind that they are going to become terrorist billionaires. And if you look at their seniors who came before them, many of them retired and looking for their pension. But very few army generals who have retired in the last 10 years is go to pension office to collect money. They've made enough money. So this is what I need to coordinate in my government. Lastly, I have to ensure that the Nigerian people themselves get busy with full employment, get busy with other activities. That's the only way you can deal with security, because national security is not always kinetic. There are some aspects of it that you have to deal with before you deal with how many bullets you've got and all of that. It's a comprehensive issue. 1 minute is not enough, but I touched a piece of it.
Thank you. Lastly, Mr. Shawari.
Well, let me ask my friend maybe if he found out that his party has endorsed another candidate today. I know we are not supposed to discuss this publicly, but that's part of insecurity that is ravaging in Nigeria. That you have a party, he has a candidate, and the party doesn't believe in their candidate. But go ahead.
That's the wrong. That's the fake executive, not the real one. The real one is still with the maybe.
No, that's so. But the other thing to discuss about security is to understand levels of insecurity, and I have divided into two. I mean, two. The first most important security that we don't discuss in Nigeria is the security of persons in terms of their economic security. And when you don't take care of that, ensure that people have jobs, they get their pension paid on time, and they have some form of security that shows that when they're vulnerable, the system is out there for them. If you don't take care of that one at first, it doesn't matter how many bullets you have, you're wasting your time. I just came from Bauchi recently, and I actually found out that the best way to be insecure in Nigeria is to be driving around with a huge convoy of security agents because that attracts the attention of people who are looking for targets. And the other part of it is to understand security beyond physical security. Look at it from economic security. In Nigeria, for instance, no many people talk about cyber security, and in the next 10 years the war that is fought against nations will be on the internet. You know, nobody will have to leave their house to shoot at anybody. They look at your water resources and how it is generated. They look at your waste management system. They look at your airline system, and they shut it down just with a stroke of computer. And nobody's talking about that here. Nobody's talking about national security, which is who is a Nigerian? How do they come in through the border? How do they live? These are fundamental issues that are not being addressed. But the second aspect of it is to also look at what are the low-hanging fruits for security. For instance, I mean, to fight security. For instance, why is it that the nation of Nigeria with 200 million people don't have drones that can track and attack? The only drone base on the continent of Africa is based in Mali, is owned by the US. The US will tell you, and because we meet them all the time, the agents in town will tell you that if they want to wipe out Boko Haram, it will take less than 1 week. And this is because they have solid intelligence of their location, their movements. They have infrared equipments all over Nigeria every time. But their interest is not to save Nigeria. Their interest is to colonize or recolonize Nigeria. So they're asking Nigeria for a base, you know, the African base, for them to help Nigeria. And like Prince have also said, you know, insecurity has become a big business in Nigeria. You know, any security system that moves from an ordinary security system and becomes a business can never be resolved. All the army generals, the inspector general of police, the NIA, we met with all of them at a recent meeting, and I can tell you how incompetent they are. They are more interested in how much can we make from the situation, and they don't want this insecurity to end. Quote me, there's nobody in the armed forces that want insecurity to end, because if they do and there's no more insecurity, they'll have nothing else to do. And they like to keep making money. Even you can ask other candidates who are here, for us to get police protection, you must be willing to pay the Nigerian police. You pay from the CP, the policemen who are following you must be paid individually. So how do you expect Nigeria to be secure when from the inspector general to the last person who is following you wants to get paid? It's the same thing that they do with terrorists. The terrorists know them, they know the terrorists. I can tell you that. But there's a place in Borno State, for instance, where there's a boundary between Nigerian army and Boko Haram. They supply drugs to women across the border, and they are fine. They have no problem, you know, and they allow them free movement across the border and back to Nigeria. But if anybody goes to that place to come and take over, that it is the Nigerian army that will kill you, even if you are in the Nigerian army. So these are issues that are not being talked about, and it's very important. And we keep saying this again, because if you look at even the platform that we have here, the people who claim to be frontliners will never come here. Not even the ones that some of you believe in. They will never come here because they don't have the capacity to have the kind of conversation we are having now. One final thing I will say is that these are some of the finest people you can find in this election. Prince, Dumebi, myself, there are some others. And I've actually set up a government based on this fine gentleman here. Prince is going to be our Attorney General. Dumebi will be Minister of Petroleum. All the finest.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, John. On that point,
That is more generous than the Minister of Finance that Peter Obi offered me. Yours is more generous.
Why would anybody make you Minister of Finance knowing that you?
I don't know. I think they don't know what they're doing. And Dumebi is promising me that I'll be Prime Minister in non-existent position. So I don't know what he's thinking.
thank you very much, John, for your
so
very
much.
engaging remarks, which will really continue. But we're going to give you one more stab at the microphone in 45 seconds per man. Give us your closing remarks. What are you offering Nigerians as an overall? What is your final offer you're making to Nigerians for this election, 2023, as a presidential candidate? I'll begin with you again, Prince Adewale.
Prince,
we are beginning with you on this point. Are you ready?
Prince, you have the floor.
maybe.
He's frozen.
Okay, let's begin with Mr. Kachiku then. The final.
Thank you very much, my distinguished moderators, fellow Nigerians. I thank you for the opportunity to listen to me tonight. Like I said earlier on, Nigeria is at a crossroads with this election. We need to face who we are, face our realities as a people. We are entering an election that seems to be determined or being defined by tribe, tongue, and religion once again. Our fathers handed over these problems to us, and we seem to want to continue living with these problems and want to hand over these problems to our children. I, as your president, or if given the honor to being your president, I will immediately tackle this problem headlong. We need to first and foremost build a nation, define a charter that ties and binds all Nigerians, so that we can say that this is the charter we signed on to, and then create a constitution based on this charter. Only when we do this can we begin to have a nation that Nigerians can be proud of. Only when we do this can we stem the tide of the middle class who leave Nigeria in droves every day because they no longer believe in Nigeria. Only when we do this can we begin to get our people to see themselves as one. The internal fights we're having that destroy our people, the regional fights we have, the community clashes we have will stop when we understand that we are one people. We are not one people. We need to tackle that headlong. As your president, I will immediately tackle the unemployment issue headlong. Over 40 to 60 million Nigerians who are unemployed, hopeless, helpless, not knowing what to do on a daily basis, nobody supporting them, nobody pointing them in the right direction. We need to retool these people. We need to repurpose these people. We need to let these people know that they are important. Nations identify their people as their asset. In Nigeria, our key assets seem to be oil and gas and our other solid minerals. I will let Nigerians know that Nigerian people are the real assets of Nigeria. In understanding that they are our assets, we will then use our God-given minerals to work for the Nigerian people and not the other way around. We need to plan for the future. Our future is being redefined by the virtual world. Our foreign affairs will be defined by the virtual world. In Nigeria, we don't seem to understand it. We control none of these infrastructures. Look at Metaverse, Instagram, and what have you. We don't control this infrastructure. And the day they shut us out, shut us down, our millions of youth who operate, who build businesses on this key infrastructure will lose their means of livelihood. We need to elect people who understand the modern reality of today. People who understand what the future is speaking about, so we can start planning for a new era in education, a new healthcare system that brings people to Nigeria, building modern infrastructure for our people, where we understand that broadband is a right to the modern Nigerian and not a privilege. We need to let our people know that government is a big brother, not just to protect them, but to love them and support them. We have never had leadership in Nigeria. Nigeria has failed along the lines of leadership, but we must reinstitute the culture of leadership. And finally, Nigerians, we are where we are today because followership. The Nigerian people allowed desperate men to rule us for this long. we've come to this defining moment, and we still see what's happening. 3 of us are here on this platform today. The rest refuse to come here. The mistake they have made in not coming here is that they cannot discuss the issues that are fundamental to the well-being of Nigeria. Were you to elect any of those people, they start disadvantaged because they don't understand the issues and they have not had the benefit of the fresh ideas we've discussed here today. Even though the time is short, we've discussed ideas here. And that's what Nigerians need. Fresh ideas to take Nigeria in a totally different direction. As your president, I will love you, I will support you, I'll protect you, I'll ensure that I build a nation under the green, white, green of our flag. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Prince, please, you're next up for your closing remarks. 45 seconds. Prince?
Okay. I think Prince is actually seems to have disappeared.
Yeah, he's frozen.
Hello?
Yes. We can hear you now, Prince. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. The first is that we owe it a duty. Yes. I know about our culture and tradition and so many things. We usually look unto God and divinity to do most of the things for us. But our problems, even though we put them in prayers, they're not spiritual. Our problems are problems of governance. And every country in the world faces the same question. The difference between us actually set up a government to address these issues. The reason why I'm here today is the emphasis that we need to have alternative narratives to development. And the narrative to development that I have is that we have to fulfill the promise, fundamental objectives and directive principle of state policy. And that doing that will enable us to eradicate poverty and unemployment and insecurity. And to do that, we need to have accountable politics. A politics where someone comes, states his ideas, and puts his own life and profile in front of you for scrutiny. And you scrutinize both their lives. And if you look at that and you believe in it, then we can.
I think his line is frozen.
Yeah.
All right, we can go to Shore and then we'll come back to him if his connection is good.
Shore, you're up, but this is for 45 seconds.
Yeah. Thank you, moderators, fellow debaters, the timekeeper. That's how we used to say it in secondary school. For this amazing opportunity for us to have a discussion about the future of Nigeria. And I want to seriously and always say thank to Rudolph, Sonala, Okendebe, and Farouk Perogi. You have no business at this point thinking about Nigeria. A lot of people have put Nigeria behind them, but this is what we wake up to in the other part of on the other part of the Atlantic. And I do hope that we get a chance to elect leaders who understand the issues affecting Nigeria. And I put them in two ways. Nigeria has two major problems before you start breaking them down to the lower levels. We have foundational problems and institutional problems. What is the foundational problem? Is that Nigeria must discuss why it became a country and never became a nation. And that is where I have proposed that we must have a change completely of our constitution, put in place a brand new constitution for the country, discussed by all the components who form the country known as Nigeria, and then start moving Nigeria towards nationhood. Nigeria is not a nation. Don't let anybody deceive. It's just a country with boundaries and statistical, components. When it becomes a nation, it will be able to address so many of these issues. And the second part is that we have institutional problems. We have issues of security, power, education, and employment, economic equality, and cultural issues that has to be resolved. But until also we become a nation, that will not be addressed. And in addressing this, you must also put in place a government or leaders who understand this, not rulers. And that is what all these people we have here today are all about. I'm sure you all tried to reach out to all the candidates, 18 of them. But as of this morning, those 18 candidates have become, I think, 12, because 5 other candidates have endorsed another candidate. And by next week, more candidates would have endorsed other candidates. That's also part of the politics that we are fighting against here. And what is important is to look at this important forum and start to take a decision starting from today. We're likely to have election on Saturday, but I'm not sure, and I want to confess here that the National Electoral Commission or Nigerian Electoral Commission is not prepared for a Saturday election. I don't know how they're going to do it with people not having money. There's no gasoline to even take electoral materials to their locations, and there are not people trained already, ready to operate what they need to do. But let's just hope that elections will happen on Saturday. And if they do so, those who are on our right side, on the comment side, either private or public comment, have a chance to elect real leaders from those who attended this event today. I can take any of these guys to lead Nigeria, and I mean it. But I believe that I'm the best, and I'm the only one who can straighten both the new and the old leaders and create a new order and a new country that will become a new nation where justice, peace, and progress and prosperity will reign supreme. I want to retire Okedibe, Sonala, Rudolph, and Perogi from writing articles about the problems of Nigeria. One of my goals.
Thank you so
But having said that, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you so much. Prince, you didn't conclude your remarks. We had to go someplace else because you were not. Are you ready?
Yeah, I do apologize. The internet failed me. I was at the point where I wanted to say that my number one manifesto is that I'll be the first government under which Owerri doesn't go to jail. So that's starting with that. He won't go to jail at all. At least that's enough democratic dividend for him. Yes. Yeah. But more seriously, we just need to come together and solve our problems. They are human problems. Our problems are anthropomorphic. We cause them by ourselves. If you look at our environment, everything, nature is prepared for us to have a good time in Nigeria. What we need to do is form a government that resembles a government. Too many ungoverned spaces in Nigeria and too many untouched lives in Nigeria. And what we need to do, we can be debating ideas. Any of the set of ideas will work. If it leads to an honest leader setting up a cabinet of honest citizens willing to help, and the public service that is organized to render services, not to take their own cut from the bleeding of the Nigerian people. And I will plead with Nigerians that every 4 years, there's always one film trick or the other. 2015, when I was talking that Buhari was a disaster, people who have been my friends for many years said that I was anti-Islamist, I was anti-North, I was this and that. And now they say I'm a prophet. If you ask them to look for a prophet, they will call me. The same thing is about to happen now. People are carried away by emotion. The governance is based on rationality. And a country has both domestic and foreign enemies.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we are going to have to rest it there. Over to you, Rudolph.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody that joined us, the candidates and moderators. Prince Adebayo, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, he's still frozen. Omoyele Shore, thank you so much for joining us. Dumebi Kechuku, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And then, of course, my moderators who did a wonderful job. Sonala, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. And Farouk, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to discuss the issue of debates. Why it's important that politicians, people who are seeking political offices in Nigeria, should subject themselves to debates where people can question them. If they don't do it now while they're begging for your votes, they are not likely going to do it when they get there. That's when you have people who don't have press conferences, who will not talk to Nigerian people. So we want to change that culture. And it starts with a conversation with my moderators. And after that, we're going to invite Nigerians to weigh in on what they think about the candidates and the idea that they could just come out on stage and dance and say, I want to dance, and that's their campaign. And people will vote for them and make them president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So on behalf of everybody who joined us to be there are so many newspapers and radio stations and TV stations who are partners in this project. I want to thank all of them and the people who are supporting us and sharing us, and all those people watching at home. I thank you, and stay tuned for a continuation of the part 2 of this conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Iroko Post Media Group Inc., in association with Iroko Post TV, invites you to the definitive debate of the 2023 presidential election season. Non-partisan Nigerian journalists Sonala Olumense, Okendebe, Farouk Perogi, and Rudolph Okonkwo, with nearly 200 years of combined experience in the profession, are pleased to invite you to the definitive presidential debate of 2023. Date: Sunday, February 19, 2023 at 6 p.m. Nigerian time, noon in New York, 7 p.m. in South Africa, 4 a.m. in Australia. The program will be televised in and outside Nigeria and carried live on all social media platforms. Here are the presidential candidates invited. All Progressives Congress parties, Bola.
I'm a pharmacist and a Nigerian with a passion for a better Nigeria. And I'm directing my question to Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. And it's regarding employment and job creation, because that's what you keep mentioning. And as a successful businessman, I'll put it this way. I'm an applicant applying to work in your successful company. And after passing through some processes, your HR department, that's the human resource department, asked me to provide a referee from my previous place of work to enable me to secure the job. And I have something to say. This is the response of my employer, whom I've worked with for the past 8 years. And this is what he has to say, and I quote: his propensity to corruption, his tendency to disloyalty, his inability to say and stick to the truth all the time, his propensity for poor judgment, his belief and reliance on marabouts, his lack of transparency, his trust in money to buy his way on all issues, and his readiness to sacrifice morality, integrity, propriety, truth, national interest for selfish interest. My question is, if my previous employee forward this reference to you, will you employ me?
All right, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Rudolph, for those who do not know, and I welcome again Sonala. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Farouk, welcome to the show.
Yeah.
And okay, welcome to the show. All right, let's start with the debate. How did it go? Let me hear from you guys. Sonala, let's start with it.
I thought it was fascinating. It's good to get together a group of men who indicated their interest in running Nigeria, and who are not afraid to sit down to talk about why they think they are suitable candidates, or even, as we heard on one or two occasions, why they think they're the best, most suitable person. We cannot, for far too long, we've had people rule Nigeria who simply wanted to have the job without any ability to discuss the content of that job. People who were never prepared to discuss the track record. Listening to these three gentlemen today who showed up here was very instructive. They talked about their motivations, the kind of programs they would be interested in. They took questions that we didn't share with them before today. And you could hear functioning minds, trained minds at various levels. So I was pretty impressed with what I heard, and impressed and happy for the future.
Okay. What is your take?
You're muted.
You're muted.
So basically, to echo what Sonala has said, we have a paradox in Nigeria. And that paradox is that we have a country that is chronically sick and profoundly comatose. And yet, what we have increasingly is a country where some of the supposedly leading candidates for our top political positions are men who are incapable of, as it were, thinking on their feet, who are incapable of taking the most basic questions that speak to a nation's development, to what it means to be a Nigerian, for example, and issues of what to do with different sectoral problems in the country. So the paradox is that men who will give you stock answers like, I just want to move the nation forward, without stipulating whether they are moving the nation forward into a ditch, into a chasm, or forward into a place of promise and vitality. And so I was quite impressed by the agility of mind of the three candidates who appeared on the debate today.
Okay. Farouk, your take.
Yeah, I agree with both Sonala and Okay. The passion, the enthusiasm, the knowledge that these three gentlemen exuded is the kind of thing that I expect the so-called leading presidential candidates in the country to exhibit. You can tell that these gentlemen have thought through the problems of Nigeria. They have thought about solutions to the problems that they have thought about. And it's not fly-by candidates. And the tragedy is that they are not in the mainstream, of the political context, or at least that's what we think. So it speaks to the rot, the fundamental rot that pervades our country, that young men with great ideas, with passion, who can move the country in a truly fundamentally different direction from what we've been habituated to, people who have the least chance to lead it. And the people who have the most chance to lead the country are people who just are the same old, people who perpetuate the same old style of, who perpetuate the dysfunctions that define us as a country and as a people. So I'm simultaneously glad that we've had the opportunity to be energized by their passion, but also sad that the people who should be here, haven't thought it worth their while to be here, to honor our invitation and honor the citizens of Nigeria who want to hear from them. And maybe when we go further, we have to go into the historical excursion into debates itself. Why is debate central to democracy? Historically, the democracy we practice today, or versions of it, trace ancestral roots to Greece. And in Greek democracy, there are two fundamental pillars of the democracy, and all of them center around talking with people, talking with the citizens who vote. Of course, remember before representative democracy, it was direct democracy. And a lot of what we practice in representative democracy owes debts to the direct democracy of Greece. And there were two institutions. One is the Aegon, which was where people actually debated. And for those who were in social science, we talk about agonistic pluralism. When we talk about agon, is debate between people who are contesting the rule. And they also had the ecclesias, which is today what we call town halls. You couldn't get elected into office if you didn't participate in the Aegon and in the ecclesias. And we see bits of that, refined bits of that in the United States, in the UK, and all modern practicing democracies. The fact that we have not institutionalized debates in Nigeria, have not made it a requirement for participating in electoral contests, is frankly a huge disservice to the people who these politicians pretend to rule over or govern.
All right. We're going to let our viewers join us in this conversation, but before they do, I want to hear from each of you. What do the people of a country miss if they don't have this opportunity to question their candidates for political offices? I'll start with you, Sanada.
I think it is obvious. If you are giving away your daughter in marriage, in our culture, in Nigerian culture, you want to know that family, not just the person to whom you are giving your daughter. You want to know that family. Both families get to know each other, because once the child is given away, once both families are supposed to become one, not two. You cannot know that groom if you've never met him, if you've never spoken to him, if your family has never interacted with his family, and vice versa. It is one key way that our families have always conducted or tried to advance the matrimonial institution. Even more important is when somebody wants to govern a group. If you are trying to govern a group, you want to ask them for their approval. Or if you are not showing up for a debate, which is a basic forum for people to get to know you, where they get to hear you, to assess you as a person, you assess your ideas, then you are taking away something central from them. You're demeaning them, disrespecting them. Otherwise, how else do you get to introduce yourself, to sell yourself to them? It is very insulting. It is very important that we establish this culture in our country. But perhaps it's part of the corruption that has destroyed us. Anybody who is afraid to show up for an electoral debate is basically afraid. I mean, you are afraid that people might see you, might hear you, might smell you for whom you really are. That's the only justification. And if that is true, you should not be considered to be a viable material for that office.
Okay. Is there any option for the people? What can the people do in a situation where their candidates or the candidates for these offices are refusing to hold debates?
Well, for me, an enlightened citizenry is one that would insist that those who propose themselves as their leaders, must, as it were, speak to their vision of leadership, speak to where they want to take the country and how they want to get there. It's it's Sonola has used a very opposite cultural metaphor, that of marriage, giving your daughter out in marriage. I'll use the metaphor of a commercial, a business transaction. If I had a company and I wanted somebody to run my company, to entrust the running of the company to, and I have, say, 10 candidates who have applied for it, and I invite them to come for a personal interview. And most of them will say to me, no, I'm not going to show up for an interview. Just choose me because I can dance, or choose me on account of me telling you that I'll move your nation forward, or some other tired phraseology that politicians are fond of using. I would not be particularly excited. And I'm appealing to Nigerians. It's very late in the game for a lot of people. A lot of people have settled for those that they are going to vote for. I think that it behooves Nigerians to say to themselves, if I make a political choice out of blind sentiment, because sentiment is essentially blind, if I choose somebody because there is some pat phrase that this person uses, or this person belongs to my ethnicity, or this person is from my religious sect, would I then retain the ability to continue to complain if this person then fails to perform? Or would I not have become complicit in the tragedy of the country, of my life, if I have chosen blindly? So I'm going to ask Nigerians to remember that this is perhaps, without question, in fact, it's not perhaps, without question, this is the most important decision that a country makes every 4 years. And that at this particular juncture in the country's history, where Nigeria is in a very precarious state, that the choice we make at this very moment in a week or so is going to perhaps fundamentally make or mar the future of the country.
All right, thank you. Farouk, you teach journalism in America. What do you tell the media? How would the media do their job if they don't have opportunities for a debate, opportunities for interviews, one-on-one interviews with these candidates? How are they going to help the people to know these people who are running for political offices?
Well, since we are using metaphors to exemplify and dramatize the problems with presidential candidates shunning debates, I'm also going to use the metaphor of the pig. In English, they say buying the pig in a poke. In Nigeria, we say it's buying the fish in the water. If you buy the fish in the water, you are cheated because it's in its elements. You can't weigh it. You don't know its length, but you pay for it. And when it comes out, you realize that you have been duped. You've been a chump. And that's what exactly this is like. When you have presidential candidates who want to rule over people, in Nigeria's case, 200 million people, and they haven't even made people aware what their programs are. They haven't subjected themselves to the crucible of a debate. You don't know what they actually stand for. They are scripted. They are, a lot of what their manifesto, someone wrote it for them. When they appear in these scripted settings, a public relations expert prepared them what to say. But in a freestyle debate such as what we are having now, or a media interview, you have an opportunity to trip them up, to provoke them to the point that the real then actually comes out. So if you have a democracy where people who want to rule over people, who want to govern people, don't subject themselves to the crucible of debate, to scrutiny, media scrutiny, they are cheating the people that they are governing. They are cheating the system. and they are fundamentally destroying the very basis of democracy itself. Because the New York Times, the Washington Post says democracy dies in darkness. For me, I say it dies in silence, and in engineered silence, in strategic silence. So it's an insult to the very institution that they pretend to be a part of. And I think we should, like my Sonala and okay had said earlier, think of ways. When people talk about restructuring, one of the ways restructuring is this floating modifier. It's an empty signifier. No one actually has infused any specific meanings into it. And I'm going to attempt to do that. One of the ways we should restructure the country or practice of democracy is to institutionalize debates, discussions into presidential contests, into governorship contests, all contests at all levels, so that people have a chance to know who they're actually voting for. Buhari has been the disaster that he is today because he was, for the most part, an open slate on whom people inscribed whatever it was that they wanted. He himself never said anything. In the North, people assumed that this was this populist who wanted to deal with elites. He himself has never, for a moment, said any of the things that were attributed to him. And today, he's manifesting who he really is, and people pretend to be shocked. They are shocked because they never had an opportunity to put him through the crucible, to ask him questions, to ask him to articulate his vision for the country. He never did. The few opportunities he had, he was shielded from critical questions from his supporters because people just assumed. So I think one of the enemies of democracy is assuming that you know what your candidate stands for without actually asking them what they stand for. And so it's disappointing that this much into democracy, we still have this culture going on, and I hope we can reverse it in the next experiment.
All right, we're going to bring people in, and they will have opportunity to ask their questions. But let me say this and see if you guys, anybody can take on it. Do you think that there's a connection between this lack of debate culture in our society and what we just saw in this election season, where most politicians were complaining about the way supporters of different political parties are reacting? Do you think that if we have this culture of polite conversations, maybe it will filter down to the supporters of different political candidates? Do you think that that is something that we may be missing because we don't have this kind of culture going?
Well, there's no question in my mind that if candidates elevate the discourse of their political practice by subjecting themselves to debates, if they therefore stipulate and define their vision and what they how they want to attain that vision, that you're going to see their supporters align with them on the basis of something substantial and concrete. And therefore, the supporters will be able to subsequently make a pitch, make a case for their favorite candidate based on the substance of what the candidate stands for. When you have sloganeering, empty sloganeering, then that's ultimately what you get from the supporters. The supporters have no anchor, and so they resort to just touting again the empty slogans and so on that are associated with their favored political candidate.
Mm-hmm. All right, Sonala, let me okay, let me not throw this at you. Let's give them the chance because we are running out of time too. I'm concerned about time. All right, I'll go to the first person is Mr. James. Mr. James, please, for everybody I call, make it just straight to the question, unless you don't have a question, and then you can make a comment on maybe what you saw, but just let's limit it to 2 minutes, please. No more than 2 minutes. Go ahead. James, you're muted. All right, go ahead.
Good, thank you. Kindly let me quote the book of Proverbs chapter 28, verse 1. The evil doer runneth when there is no pursuer, but the righteous are as a bold lion. This is what happened today. The evildoers, they ran away from this program because they are evildoers, and while there's no one pursuing them. And the lions, those with the hearts of lions, they appeared to explain quite a lot of things to Nigerians concerning what they have to do. Anyway, the book of 1 John chapter 2, verse 17 says, the world is passing away along with its desires, but whosoever does the will of God remains forever. The old political class in Nigeria, they already expired. They are on their way out. These young guys who appear today are the people to replace them. These are the people that are doing the will of God. So we sincerely wish them well. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you, Mr. James. Forefathers, Ernest.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rudolph, and greetings to everyone on the panel and the chat. Yeah, I think that it's an important idea to have a presidential candidate talk to the people, obviously, and then they should be made to pay a political price for it if they refuse to engage with the people. And I don't know how they are going to, the process, how it works. Maybe they have to put rules in place for them to engage with the public, and because I, for one, believe that there is a lot of room for creating a more advanced and a more engaged democratic system in Nigeria. And if these leaders don't engage with us, it's going to erode that chance. In other words, we are even trying to get something somewhere. So my question is there a path to amending the constitution in a way that will enshrine it so that our political candidates should engage the public at least in 3 major debates before any election, especially in terms of the presidency and governorships?
All right, anybody can take Sanala, okay, or Farouk. Anybody can take any of the questions unless it's directed to you. In that case, it's your question. Did you hear me? Okay, go ahead.
I'll defer to Sonala and my brother Farouk.
Okay. Sonala, you're muted.
Forefathers, would you kindly repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I meant, is there a way to enshrine it in the constitution of the country that any presidential candidate and governorship candidates should be able to attend 3 major debates before any election?
Thank you. The short answer is yes, it can, but that will be in the form of a constitutional amendment, and that takes time. So what I think we can continue to do is to push at the edges of this process to continue to put pressure on the political parties and the politicians, even as we keep an eye on the eventuality of such an amendment. Right now, this is not something that I think you can achieve in a hurry. Thank you.
All right.
Think
so. Okay, go ahead.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is doable, but I doubt that most of the people in politics now will be favorably disposed to it, because that would amount to some sort of political suicide. If they try to make this legalized or institutionalized debate. We all know them, in the National Assembly, these are people who have no capacity to articulate a thought. They are there because someone put them there, or they have enough money. So if this becomes a requirement of the electoral process, a lot of the people there will not get into government. We have seen members of parliament who are barely literate, and you wonder how they actually got there. So Maybe this has to be aspirational. It's very unlikely that it can happen right now. But if sufficient pressure is sustained, for the long haul, I think it just might happen. But we know that it can't happen right now.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately, it's the people. If the people begin to punish candidates at the polling booths who decline invitations to debate, then the candidates will figure out that this is what you must do if you take your candidacy seriously. So I agree with Sanala, I agree with Farouk, that it's desirable to do this. I'm not sure that a constitutional provision is quite the way to go. It looks like invoking the nuclear option, in my view, for a problem that can be solved through really societal change. So if voters,
the reason why I say for presidential candidates and governorship positions is because they are executive positions that are immune. These people are going to go into office and they are untouchable.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that, and my argument remains, presidential candidates. I think that it's sacrilegious that a presidential candidate who takes him or herself seriously would be absent from all debates and yet expect to be taken seriously. And so Nigerians, it's up to Nigerians to say, if you don't show up for debates, if we don't know what you stand for, and if you don't have the courage of your convictions about your policy prescriptions to debate them openly with your peers and with other contestants, that we're not going to take you seriously as a candidate. So that's really it. But beyond that, if candidates debate, and even if they give a great showing, there is no guarantee that once in office they're not going to renege on some of the commitments that they have made on the debate stage.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Rudolph, I wish to quickly add something to what both
Go ahead.
just said, particularly Farouk. The question of the legislature. If you are expecting something truly novel, something great from the Nigerian National Assembly, you are not paying any attention. Today, not tomorrow, today, go to the website of the National Assembly, nas.gov.ng. Go there and spend 10 minutes. Try to click through various areas of that website. First of all, it's empty. I have a forthcoming article on this. It's empty. It has no history. It's badly written. When you say the archives, for instance, they don't have any archives. Okay? And then if you drill down and look at individual legislators, both the House and the Senate, they are contributing almost nothing. This is the most expensive legislature in the world.
Yeah.
Yet, we're really not getting anything from them. You can't ask, you trace what each candidate, anybody who has been there for 2 terms, for instance, just find out what they have been doing the past 8 years. And you come away in tears. So, the National Assembly is a problem on its own and a part of the bigger issue that we have.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. One man, you're next.
All right. Thank you, Rudolph. So I really came into the conversation when Farouk was talking about the etymology of the. Sorry, let me bring myself. So I really came into the conversation when Farouk was talking about the etymology of the word politics. The Greek origins of it, of course, affairs of cities. Another word that has its etymology in Greece is the word idiot, which in Greece means idiot, which is a non-participant rather than the derogatory term that we use it as. So it is actually a lay person. So that brings to that conversation about public debates in politics. I'm not sure. And by the way, I really came on because of Farouk, because I came across him when he was writing all those hatchet jobs on Tinubu pre the primaries, but Tinubu still straddles trunk. So that's really that's really why I came on. But just to go to the debate, I'm not sure that a public debate serves essentially a greater purpose than a public interaction. Because if you look at the interactions that the three leading candidates had with the Nigerian Economic Forum, we got more value out of that rather than a combative environment of a debate. So the combative environment of a debate, it doesn't give you the expansiveness of somebody's thought on a policy position, and it doesn't really give you any real insight or any greater insight into the workings of their mind. But an interaction with senior minds who are able to, in a convivial, relaxed environment, have a conversational interaction with the candidate, it imminently serves a greater purpose than the gotcha moments that journalists are looking for in that sort of a combative debate environment. So I don't think a public debate serves any purpose that rather than just some faux machismo. And we saw that with Trump. It's just faux machismo, isn't it? It's just puffing and peacocking. So that's what I wanted to bring to the conversation.
Thank you, one man. Who wants to take on one man?
I'm not even sure I understand what he's trying to say, frankly, but oh, go ahead.
Farouk, I read your piece a lot. Since your name was specifically mentioned, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I wanted our moderators to answer the questions, and maybe when you come on, when it's your turn, you can say anything you want to say.
Let me just. I do not think that if you look at the way that the U.S. Commission on Presidential Debates worked, the idea is not to provide any journalists with an opportunity for gotcha moments. Today, if you look at what we did here, it was civil, it was polite, courteous. We asked questions, they provided answers. If we needed clarifications, we tried to do that. That's what it's supposed to be, a dignified environment where candidates can exchange positions, but also take questions, clarifications from the questioners, from the journalists. It's not to insult or to set traps. And I do not think that in principle, that should be that is in dispute.
All right.
Okay. So
Sorry,
Farouk,
a little bit, and then I'll be quiet. The point that I am making is, rather than have a debate where you have all the candidates lined astride, and then they're trying to one-upman each other, I think a better, more productive way is to have a candidate as a sit alone, and then you have senior minds interrogating him. You get more value from that than that combative debate environment. That's the point I'm making.
Okay. Let me because I'm really keen to hear how Farouk responds to this, because I think that he provoked the original question. But let me sort of say that one man went to what?
One man went to Mo. One man went to Mo.
Okay.
One man went to Mo.
So
I
think you are creating a distinction that is not really particularly pertinent. So if you say that this is the way one particular mode is better, I want to propose that it is not mutually exclusive, that you can have a sit-alone, a one-on-one with candidates where you go in depth into their programs for different sectors of a country's life. But a debate does something different. A debate brings all the candidates together. And in a sense, the candidates will then try to sell at the same venue, in the same sitting, their different visions for the country. And if you're talking about even a hostile, seemingly hostile environment, I think that this is something that is useful. If there is a bit of hostility, a bit of gotcha moment, right? Because the president of a country faces crisis on a daily basis. There are issues in the country that need the leader of the country to think quickly.
On their feet.
So if a candidate is going to be rattled by the experience of being on stage with other contenders for the same position, I would suggest that there is an absence of the temperament and the acumen on the part of this particular leader to be, of this particular candidate to be the leader of the country. And that's sort of where the little that I wanted to say before I expect Farouk's broader answer.
Okay.
So first of all,
okay,
he mischaracterized what I said. We live in an age where sometimes the mischaracterizations of what people say becomes the basis, becomes what people. I never said. I never gave the etymology of politics. What I say was agon, A-G-O-N, and ecclesias. These were two important structural props in Greek democracy when it was direct democracy. The agon, A-G-O-N, was a debate between candidates, and it was often fierce and vigorous and passionate. People who wanted to rule appeared and exchanged ideas. And then there was the ecclesias, which is what we would today call town hall, where the candidates interacted with the citizens that they wanted to rule. So I'm saying that current forms of democracy derive inspirational strength from these examples. So I never gave the etymology of politics, and there was nothing remotely close to what one man mischaracterized me as saying. So debates, and I think OK captured this very brilliantly. The debate, the form of the debate, the vigor it inspired, the cross-fertilization of ideas, bring out the totality of a person. Who is talking?
No, I think it's I'll have to. Yeah, I muted the person. Go ahead.
Okay, it brings out. We are as human beings. We represent. We embody a multiplicity of impulses. We represent different dimensions. So it's not just your responses, your scripted responses to questions that defines you as a person. We want to know your emotions. How are you able to handle difficult questions? How are you able to handle provocations that come? That is what being president requires. So in a debate, in a debate setting, even those gotcha moments. I wrote an article recently about Kwankwaso's what I call superhuman restraints, when he was asked questions that appeared on the surface to be very ridiculous. And why did I praise him? Because as a journalist and as a journalism professor, I teach my students to ask questions, rude questions that trip up politicians. Trip them up. Ask them questions that get a dander up, that provoke them. How do they react in those moments? Those reactions tell us, give us a profile, a psychological profile of who they are. So to limit the dimensions of questioning that we can extend to our presidential candidates, I think does a lot of violence to the notion of democracy itself. This is all part of the package. We either embrace it or we devise something different, if that's what you want. You cannot say you want to be president of a people, 200 million people in the case of Nigeria, and then you are setting parameters, you are setting limits on what you can be asked. There's a lot of privilege in being president. It's a lot of privilege, and that privilege is also responsibility. A part of the responsibility to earn the privilege to be president out of 200 million people is to subject yourself to the crucible of debate, of questioning, of scrutiny. And so that's what I'm going to say.
All right, thank you. Let me say one last thing on this. We offered even some of the candidates a one-on-one interview. So if they don't feel comfortable having a debate with certain people for whatever reason, that we were willing to have a one-on-one interview with them, which we will play during this session. And they turned it down. So it's not about a debate as per se. No, one man, we are moving on to somebody else. It's not about debate per se. It's just that they don't want to do that. All right, man of prestige, Ernest.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
All right, so you can hear us. That's what it means.
Yeah.
Let's move to somebody else. Who is next? Ebby, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rudolph. I always feel, I don't know, when I see you in suit and tie, I'm like, look at him. He's one of us. Now he's looking too corporate. Even Professor Perugi is not in suit. But it is what it is.
Hold on. You said something very important, because when the candidates came on, they were, one of them, before we came on live, they were saying, am I going to dress up the way you are dressed? I said, look, you guys are settled. I'm still building my career. You know, Farouk is settled. Everybody's settled. I'm still starting my career.
It's okay. It's journalism 101, right? You gotta look clean. But even doctors, they are the most casual. One is just right there by your the left side, and he's always casual. Anyway, this was very nice. The whole thing went really smooth. I was busy as usual, but I was having an eye and listening, and the quality of the questioning from the moderators were fantastic. The quality of the personnel that the moderators are, these are people that I follow both on Twitter. I don't know if Mr. OK is on Twitter. He's the only one. I know Somala. I read Perogi's Twitter stuff, and sometimes I don't agree with him sometimes, but I like his English and his tuition, and you know, he's up there. Anyways, I have a few things to observe. And everybody know, maybe as much as at least Dr. Rudolph knows, I'm a friend of this channel. But I want to also say that it is not everyone. My full name is Ebenezer Komalafe, by the way, and I'm calling from Canada. I just want to say that it's not everybody, all of the 18 candidates that are really debate shy. We also have to consider some few things, because we have packed the rest of the 15 candidates, and you know, we seems to be whipping them today. This is a fantastic forum, but at the same time, we know that the rest of them, some of them who didn't turn up today, are not all of them are debate shy. I mean, even if the 18 turn up today, except something have changed with the licensing of this studio for this channel, we might not be able to. I don't think the studio will take all of them. Maybe you have to break it into 2 or 3, but it's still good for them to turn up. But I'm just making these observations, and we've seen many of them turn up in the mainstream medias back home, in Chatham House. I mean, at this time, at this same kind of situation in Chatham House, one of the candidates broke the viewing record, you know, that Chatham ever had for a candidate coming from Nigeria. And, you know, of course, some didn't still come to Chatham. Not all were invited to Chatham, but we need to put all this behind our mind. The other thing I'm thinking also, as we are thinking about debates also being enshrined as part of the presidential process or electoral process, is, you know, not even America, except I'm making a mistake, with a much older democracy has 18 presidential candidates. I think this is also a stress on the populace to go through 18 candidates to choose one. Um, it's stress. I think at some point, the electoral process needs to be redefined. We are growing as a democracy, but I think this needs to be looked to. Imagine 18 people on the floor or having 2, 3, 4 levels of, at the political level, where they want to choose the one person. It's fine. And that doesn't include all of us for now. It's more or less a party thing. But when it comes to the national, I think we need to streamline that. The final thing I would say is out of here, but I'm sure is on the comment. Mr. One Man, the candidate that we know you always favor in your analysis and that loves that one-on-one predefined and all that, even at the NESG, which I watched, that same candidate, which I know you are backing, which it was what Dr. Faruqi, Dr. Faruqi didn't mention any name, but the description of what he said about the kind of arrangement we are seeing, predefined, image maker, occasional people, and there is no interaction. That was what Dr. Faruqi described. And you jump in the comment section here because he pinched you. That same candidate was telling them at the NESG that I'm not going to give you all the details because I'm the first, because they're going to steal my notes. These are the things that we see. So your description of the ideal kind of interaction is still really might not give us what we want. So we like what happened today. All of them are here. It was very civil. They like themselves. They throw jokes at each other. Some of them said they're going to make the other one minister. The other one said he was not going to ensure the other one doesn't go to jail. So back to you, Mr. Right. One more. Please note that. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you. I don't think there's a question there, but just to make a comment about what he said. We were prepared for 9 people that we invited. We had Zoom. We are going to transfer this to Zoom. We also expanded the number of people we can take in this studio. Now we can take 12, but as we were watching, we were able to, if we needed to take 25, we could have taken 25 inside the studio. So we're prepared to have all of them, but they just didn't show up. But thank you. If you're next. Please, if you, for the purpose of this formal thing, we want people to tell us where their real name and where they're joining us from. So.
Okay.
And please make it 2 minutes. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. I'm calling from Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh. You're my next door neighbor.
Hi, Farouk.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good.
Okay. I'm not a politician, but I'm interested in politics. I don't plan to become one day. But I have a question. It's one of the things they brought up during the debate. And that is one thing that has constantly, I'm trying to figure out why we are still struggling in Nigeria in terms of crude oil. We are, I would say, crude oil dependent or petroleum dependent in Nigeria. I won't even say energy because we don't even have energy. But my question is this. We have 3 refineries, if I'm not mistaken. And does it mean that Nigeria, 4, okay. Does it mean that Nigeria as a country cannot fix any of that refinery instead of giving Dangote contract to build a new refinery altogether? So I'm trying to understand that scenario. Why can't they fix at least just one? I was talking to my sister the other day and she said they have to wake up around 3 a.m. to go and look for fuel. so that they can, drive around and then, put in the generator because of the electricity. And this is very risky. So I have a coworker here that she's from Venezuela. They have crude oil. We all know that. And she said that the easiest thing they can get over there in Venezuela is petroleum, gas, fuel. So why can't the same thing happen in Nigeria? I still don't understand that. But okay, if you can just answer that question, Farouk, any of you guys, and so I can understand this. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
Okay. I think one of the presidential candidates, Adebayo, did give a very clear and cogent answer. The destruction, and I use that word advisedly, the destruction of Nigeria's 4 refineries was a tactical move by those, again, to quote Adebayo, who capture state power for their self-enrichment and self-aggrandizement. So this is by design, okay? Every year, beginning with Abacha's time, money has been voted for turnaround maintenance of Nigeria's 4 refineries. It's always understood that those refineries are not going to be repaired because to repair them or to build new ones would mean that this great scam of fuel subsidy will become a moot point. And so we have a country that is a crime in progress. Nigeria is a crime scene, okay? And the most practiced and the most vicious criminals in Nigeria are those who call themselves Your Excellency, okay? And I'm talking about the president of Nigeria, all the way down to local government councillors, okay? So Nigeria is a crime scene, and we have created a country that is congenial to the practice of crime. So part of the task in our country, and it's not just about the refineries, it's also about other sectors of the country, right? So every year, I once had a debate with a friend, and he said, can you prove that any money is stolen by politicians? And I said, there's actually a simple way to prove that. Every year, governments at the federal, state, and often at the local government areas propose budgets. Those budgets are passed. Those budgets are appropriated. The monies are spent. And if you look at those budgets, sometimes they say, we're going to build 5 hospitals. They've spent the money. You can't find the hospitals. We're going to equip our schools with computers and so on. Those schools are not equipped, but the money has been spent. That is clear case of corruption. So you should be able actually to sort of invert this legal doctrine. So in sort of the legal doctrine, you say that somebody is innocent until proven guilty. I think that we have to adopt a different system where we assume on the guilt of our political leaders until they can prove their innocence. So at every level, but to sort of go back to your question about refineries, it's a deliberate strategic plan to ensure that the refineries do not work. Because once the refineries are not working, even the money that was invested by the federal government in Dangote's refinery would have built perhaps 2 refineries. So it's all a scam, and so on. So I'll stop there.
All right, thank you. Okay, Ife, thank you so much for that question. We go next to Igbo Basics. Next. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I just did. Hello, everyone, and particularly to the person I will call a master, Okendibe. very pleased to see you here today. The last I spoke to you, you were en route somewhere in the Europe or thereabout for a book tour. And I spoke to you about Chief Zebudayo Korigwengobe's project, stuff like that. That is on the sideline. I'm particularly pleased to see you today. And for the rest of us here, particularly those from Georgia, because it looks like I have to be now scared of people from Georgia. Because it was 42 years ago, I was vice president of student government at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff in Arkansas. And just about 2 hours ago, somebody I have not heard from before called me up on the phone. And he said, this is from Georgia. And I remember what you said 42 years ago when you were running for office. And the statement you made was a broken plate has no mekwatarism, or your mother told you about Abokburebu and we're giving Wapen Fakota. It's like, I'm like, somebody from the past. What am I saying is that we all got to be careful with the things that we say, because it follows us for the rest of our life. That was the case of the Iheme Remedy, Enwegin Fata, whichever way you take it. Now, for today's occasion, I carefully watched some of the portions, and they touched upon a lot of security, and they touched upon also lingua franca. I heard you guys talking about the language. That's where we are coming sometime. My name is Alexander Iheke, not Igbo Basics, but Igbo Basics is a publication that I started in 1995, and a lot of people come to know me as Igbo Basics. That's not my name. My name is Alexander Iheke. I'm from the state of New Jersey, and I've had the privilege of working with our dear brother, Rudolph Okonkwo, Dr. Damages. So it's indeed a privilege to be here today. Now I'll go straight to what my Farouk and our brother Sanola, and maybe I have not met you, but somewhere along the line we all meet. We are all soldiers here. Straight to my comment today, it goes to the issue of security and then the issue of languages. And on the security issue, based on what is happening currently in Nigeria, it goes to, should there be something done where a section of the country is being threatened by renegade Judas and fearmongers, which, by the way, a bunch of our leaders are also fear merchants. What is it that can be done that the situation where a section of the country is being threatened, seriously being threatened, on 1 week to go for elections, so that in due course, nobody would have the opportunity, would have the guts to threaten a whole country. Because I believe that if the Southeast is threatened by lockdown, by shenaniganism, by whatever you call it, and Lagos is being protected, should the Southeast not also be protected so that in the next 1 week, people will come out and actually exercise their franchise, which is the civil responsibility? I know that the Obidati movement has spoken about that situation yesterday in depth. So I'm bringing it to this panel to try to shed some light and have a little bit more understanding. On the lingua franca issue,
sorry, no, we can't. We don't have time. There are a lot of people waiting, so we have to stop.
Let me conclude with my lingua franca issue. Should not really be so much of a question, because we do have every section. We have English as what we know to speak. Do we have a national presidential debate panel or an institution that can handle that, going in line with what my brother Eddie said from Canada?
All right, thank you. So for those who are coming next, please, one question. We are out of time. We are going to leave here in another 20-something minutes. So please, we want to get all the people who are already in the studio to get the opportunity. So one question. Who wants to take this? Anybody?
This is marginalization with the minorities. Only when we reach our time, they go say, 1 minute. This is not.
Now today, doctor.
I know I'm protesting on behalf of the minorities. I'm protesting.
All right. Who wants to answer? Faruko, Sonala, okay. Who? Anybody?
I'll defer to Farouk and Sonala.
Okay.
Well, I think Sonala hasn't spoken in a while, so
okay.
I'll defer to him.
Unfortunately, he doesn't have. Let me see if he's
muted.
Okay, go ahead, Sonala. Unmute yourself. You have to unmute yourself. Yeah. I tried to do it here, I couldn't. So
he's still muted. Okay, now.
All right.
Okay. I was saying that I'm actually waiting for another one, so I don't want to take too much of two people. So if Farouk wants to go with Igbo basics, I think he should go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Frankly, I'm not. Is it about language? Is it the language question?
Okay, you are muted.
In language. Okay. Oh, okay. The Southeast, I think, the situation in the South.
I think he was talking about the lockdown of the Southeast,
the security,
and so on, the security situation.
Yeah, well, I confess that I'm not up to speed on that. But if what you say is accurate, that's condemnable. No part of any country of Nigeria should be put under forced lockdown, especially in time of elections. So I condemn it. If what you say is accurate, I condemn it, and the government should forthwith withdraw the lockdown of the region so that people can have the right to vote and exercise their civic duties. For language, I have my own opinions about that. I have written a book chapter, which is coming out maybe later this year or next, about this language policy. I don't think it's well thought out, but this is not a forum, I think, for us to discuss that. But let's limit this to the debates and the elections. Thanks.
So let me jump in briefly. Nigeria fought a civil war over 30 months in which 2 to 3 million lives were lost. On the question of Nigerian unity, a section of Nigeria attempted to secede from Nigeria, ultimately by deployment of force. The Nigerian state instituted the logic of its indissolubility and of its oneness. I think that anytime we adopt any policies in Nigeria that will seem to have an adverse impact on a section of the country that is not equally applied throughout the country, that would mean that we suggest that the 2 to 3 million people who perished in a war to continue to answer to one Nigeria is a travesty. And so a lot of people are worried, justifiably so, by the seeming movement of military assets into the Southeast, and therefore by the understanding that there is a militarization of the Southeast, which people are reading as an attempt to intimidate voters from that area of the country. The government, the federal government, has to be particularly attentive. This is an election that has excited international attention. Any suggestion that that election is not free and is not credible through an act of commission or omission by on the part of the Nigerian government will be tragic and will end up ultimately delegitimizing the forthcoming elections. So that's one part of the problem. The other part of the problem, which perhaps has provided the government with a kind of justification for bringing in soldiers and other coercive elements into the Southeast, is the idea that there are elements of the IPOB who are determined to deter elections holding in the Southeast, who continue to proclaim that there will not be any elections. So this has given the government cover to say that what we're doing is to ensure indeed security. But of course, when it's having a chilling effect on the people, when people are afraid to come out, then that's something that the government has to think about carefully. My one last thought is that all of this development speaks to a certain sharing competence on the part of the government, because when you have such a challenge, you think proactively. It is not this late in the game that the government then makes a move that people will see as precipitate and as designed to perhaps handicap a political party or a candidate or indeed an entire section of the country. That's where I'd like to stop.
All right. Thank you, Alexander, and thank you. Okay, let me. There's a question I want to take from the comment section, because people are also commenting there and making asking questions. Okay, this is from Kulata, and he wanted to know what value is a debate that is in English in a nation where 133 million people live in poverty. Winners of our elections since 1999. They have avoided debates and have been rewarded. So that's the question he has for the moderators.
Say that again.
That what is the value of a debate that is in English in a nation where we have 133 million people living in poverty? I mean, I want to believe that poverty also means that they don't have
access to the English language.
Yeah. And we are the winners of our elections since 1999. They've all avoided debates. What is the value of this debate that we are demanding that they should show up and be part of? So anybody can take
it. So Farouk,
yeah, I mean, I think that's a very crudely instrumentalist understanding of debate that by itself is going to bring about poverty. I mean, it's going to solve poverty problems. That it's going to suddenly get people who are not literate be literate. No, we are saying that we are practicing a system of government, and that system of government has its structures. And one of the structures of that system of government is debate. It's central to its success, to its running, and so to suggest that it doesn't do anything, frankly, sidesteps the issues at point, which is that you cannot have a democracy where, but I like the point that someone made earlier, which is that there's some sort of debate has taken place, some sort of conversation has taken place, but it's at platforms that are predetermined, where the sort of back and forth and rhetorical crucibles that they would have gone through in this kind of setting, didn't take place. So I mean, we are still evolving as a country. We are not where we are supposed to be. But I get that there are a lot of people who do not speak English and who will not benefit from this debate. But the solution to it is not to stop it. It is to keep going. I made a point in a previous article that although people have said repeatedly that Nigeria is a country, not a nation, which basically suggests that we are a people of different ethnicities, different religious orientations, who are just brought together by the British. while that is largely true, what is also true but barely acknowledged is that a nation is emerging out of the rubble of whatever, out of disparity. A nation is emerging. A lot of young people today see themselves more as Nigerian than the ethnic groups they come from. Meet an average 18-year-old or 20-year-old from any of the major cities. They are more Nigerian than their parents. And it's not because of anything we have done, it's in spite of all that we have not done. So we live in a separatist nation. We live in a nation that is torn apart by divisions. But at the same time, in spite of everything, the next generation is emerging and they are completely different from how we are. So we have an obligation to make this country work. Those of us who are placed in positions to help in this process should not stop, because it's happening. And a few days ago, I had 3 visitors from different parts of Nigeria, living in the United States here. 2 of the 3 visitors, 2 of them had their children in Nigeria, and they all met here and they were having a conversation, and they're from different parts of Nigeria. But they were united more by there's a growing repertoire of cultural symbols that are being relentlessly produced in Nigeria, to which young people, subscribe to, so almost without even thinking. What united them was the Pidgin English and Nigerian English. And these people don't even speak. There's a young man who comes from Ogidi. I'm not sure that's the right pronunciation, which is Chinua Achebe's hometown. And when I told him what's a hometown, and he had to think about it, and he said Ogidi. I said, you do know how important that town is? He said, why? I said, that's Chinua Achebe's hometown. It didn't have the same kind of resonance for him as it does to me, because he sees himself, basically, I grew up in Abuja. I go to Ogidi once in a year. It doesn't mean that much to me. It doesn't mean as much to me as it meant to my dad or would have. So there's this generation of Nigerians that are emerging, and I'm very sensitive to this emergence, to this ethnogenesis that is taking place in Nigeria. So when people say Nigeria is not a nation, it is becoming a nation, not in our generation, but in the generation that's coming after it. And so I don't want to be blinded to that fact. And so there's a lot of demographic, anthropological changes taking place in Nigeria that we should be sensitive to. And I'll stop there and let someone.
All right. Thank you, Farouk. I just want to add that if something happened during a debate, it doesn't have to be the English radio station or the English TV station that will bring it to people who don't speak English. I mean, journalists are also write in other languages, and if it's so important, it will get to them. Hausa service or Igbo service or Yoruba service, whatever language, we get it to them. All right, let's go to Ovie. Ovie, you're next.
So you skipped me. I went to Ovie.
Oh, I don't know this.
You can go to Ovie. It's fine. I'll go last.
Okay, Ovie, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dameji. I must confess, I did not actually watch nor listen to the debate. I get caught up in other things, but I'll follow up. I joined the conversation when Mr. Oke Ndebe was talking about the debate. As much as I want to agree with him about his own submission about the debate, I hope by this time next week, the conversation will shift from why the elephant in the room Tinubu attend, why attend to more factors that actually give him that effrontery to say, you know what, I'm not going to attend this debate, I'm not going to talk to these people. If we want to go into that, yes, I will agree with Dr. Damage saying that it's not just going to be in English, or that tribes and languages we connect to, it is so important. But the fact remains is that, as of today, what is the reach of that debate? What in terms of all the coverage come together? 20% of the population of the people that will actually vote, right? Bola Tinubu, with his investment in media, can easily cover that. He can be in 5 places at the same time. So he can decide to say, you know what, I'm not going to go based on that. Another factor is, again, who are the people organizing these debates? You know, a country where statistically, they say, what, 65% of their population are Nigerian youth, even within the voting population, 18 to 45 are what, 40% of the total. So imagine if the youth actually come together and organize such debates. With, you know, people like Tinubu say, oh, I'm not going to attend. Can you actually bluff about 60% of the voters just like that? Or women, for instance, who have what, 49% of the total population who are going to vote. If I remember clearly, that of America was actually resuscitated again after 16 years of not, you know, the presidential debate by women of League voters in 1976. So who is organizing it? Because that's one of his Tinubu's excuse, that I don't trust the people, the organization who's putting this together. As somebody who is a practitioner in that industry, I kind of understand what he's saying. He knows what can go wrong. So he can afford to say, I am not going to, you know, go that route. So going forward, I hope the conversation will be more serious than the importance, or if it's not important. So, Mr. Farouk, I kind of, let me not say I disagree with you, but I'll see what happened, transparent at the Chatham House in terms of Kwankwaso from a different angle. I appreciate the fact that you encourage your students to ask questions that are challenging or throw wherever they are aiming at of their game. I also appreciate that. But another angle you should see from is that time and who also have to be factored in. This is a man who has been in this business for the past 30 years. You think he would just wake up from Kanu and head to London without expecting such a question? No, that's not going to happen. So he will premeditate how he's going to respond to such a question. And at a time whereby the medias are shying away from him, what a better place to bring the media attention to him. Media were forced to talk about him, whether they like it or not, when he responded to that question, the manner in which he responded to it. It drew people to start paying attention to his credentials, his antecedents, what he stands for.
Okay,
so
Ovie, we're running out of time. Round up, please.
Yeah, rounding up is to actually respond to Igbo Basics question regarding Samuel Ekpa. I might be wrong, but I think there's a rumor somewhere that the federal government actually approached the Finnish representative in Nigeria regarding Samuel Ekpa, and there's actually a debate, a conversation going on within the Finnish government cycle.
All right, thank you. We're totally out of time. We have radio stations and TV stations that are connecting to this, and we told them 3 hours, and it's we have about 7 more minutes. So what we're going to do is, because we started late a little bit, we take the people who are in here quickly, just questions, please. Not, you know, this is not the typical shows we do during the week or during the weekend. So anybody wants to comment to Ovie's comment? Anybody? Is any need? All right, H.O., you're next.
Everybody they talk with it, they their mouth. So me I go talk my own.
This is 1 minute.
Augusta, you give people more than 1 minute, not breathe that leg. Anytime I want to talk, you just start with your own match break.
Let's just do one.
Anyway,
minute.
To my brothers and sisters that organize this, I said thank you so much. This is a good step in the right direction. And it is obvious that all those wicked people know that it is not business as usual from now henceforth, because we need to build a new Nigeria. And to my son Showore, I said thank you for not disappointing us. It was obvious we were very tired, but because of the regard you have for us, Nigeria, you still come up to show up to tell us that you are always there for us. So if nobody observed that, I did. And I say, thank you. You didn't let us down. Because of you, I not go church today. And I'm grateful you did not let me down. Adebayo said something that catch my attention. He talks about, is it 3 trillion, whether naira or dollar, that is not associated to subsidies. And that money that they collaborate anyhow. And we are crying for hunger. I beg, we need to really ask about that money. because we need it. We need that money to take children out of the street. We need that money to rehabilitate our youth who are drug addicts. We need that money to create jobs for our youth that are jobless. Let's look for that money. So, Mona, bring Adebayo back, make it tell us about that money. Thank you.
Thank you, Echo. Thank you so much. Ike, just 1 minute. If you have a question, we prefer that.
Yes, I have a question. Good afternoon, everybody. Like I told you yesterday, I didn't follow, but I have a question for the moderators. I want to ask, did they talk anything about the wastefulness of entourage, where the president is traveling? Somebody is holding his pen. Another person is holding his umbrella. Another person is holding his wristwatch. Another person is holding one phone. Another person is holding one phone. And he will go to any 2 or 3 states, take a governor, go to the National Assembly, take senators and House representatives, and take one traditional ruler, one chief, or 2 billionaire. You know, this is on the expenses of Nigerians. So I don't know if did any of them talk about how do we stop this? Because this is eating too deep into Nigeria. This is the people's money that they are being wasted on the name of going outside Nigeria for whatever reasons, I don't know. So I don't know if any of you have anything to say about this wastefulness we see both in the federal government, both in the state government, and even in the local government. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ike. Who wants to take that? So now that we've been a while, we heard from you. Okay. Anybody can unmute yourself.
The to take it.
Okay. The brief response is yes. In general, the candidates who were with us today did cover the question of in a broad strokes. We didn't have time to explore a lot of things, so we were we try to keep things short. Yes, we've had wasteful governments, we still do, but instead of what we discussed today, may I take this opportunity to refer you to the website of the Auditor General of the Federation, and perhaps better still to the website of the Auditor General of your state, whichever state that is. If you don't have the website, ask me, send me a message, and I will send it to you. If you read the audit reports of the past, any audit report of the past 5 years of your state, and you don't weep, I'll be owing you something. There is a lot in terms of wastage, in terms of outright looting at both the federal and state governments. And the question is, what are we doing about it? So you're right. These questions are there about wastage, a lot of it, perhaps far more than we know so far.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Danladi, you're next. Just a minute, please. Make it 1 minute.
Yeah, so mine now, I don't think I will talk much. I was impressed with the discussion because the ideas they are also bringing is also good to defer because even if they don't win the presidential election, I think we have been aroused to consciousness and discussing the problems that we have in this country. I'm happy because I told you that this is going to be my first time to vote for a president in this country. I've made up my mind. I'm going to vote now. It's unfortunate that I didn't do in the past elections. And simple truth, just like yesterday, I told you people, I don't believe the system works. I don't even believe whether my vote will count. I always have a PVC, but I've never voted. But this time around, let's try and see whether we will not continue to sit on the fence and see if something will happen for the better. I wish other candidates are around, just like what I said. I would have loved to hear them because they should not be neglecting such kind of platform. They should, every opportunity they get to engage, we are listening. Like people like us are independent voters. We don't have any party in our mind. So people like us, are the kind of people that they can sway. But if they shy away from the medium of reaching out to us, it also have a consequence. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Danladi. Final person is Dr. Dominic. Dominic, you go ahead. 1 minute, please.
Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Dr. Dominic. I'm a physician in New York City, same as Rudolph. Just a few quick comments. The debate was a great show. The debate was a great showing. I was actually surprised by Prince's breakdown. I hadn't really paid much attention to Prince, so I love his showing. One thing that wasn't asked to Sowore was the party issue about the 12 governors who had reneged their support for him. He had an interview today, which I believe is why he came late. So you guys can go and watch that on Arise News. The big thing I wanted to ask today, even if we don't have time, but is more of a food for thought, is what does it mean to be a party frontrunner? If Sowore was in PDP or in APC, wouldn't he be considered a frontrunner? If Tinubu had decided to run in AAC or some party that doesn't have a name, he obviously will not be a frontrunner. So the concept of what a frontrunner is this something that is pushed by the media? And how can we generate a level of consciousness where people get to see the candidates for who they are, rather than what or whatever platform or whatever means they've used to push themselves? That is a big question that we have to ask ourselves, because what the concept of frontrunner does in this Nigerian election is it pushes people who sometimes may not have ideas, but because they they skip all the hard work and just jump on a party that is already being funded, be it through state capture or through illegal means, it gives them some level of exposure that they have not worked hard for. That is the one thing I wanted to mention. One quick thing which OK did not address was the NNPC issue. And just to cover it in like 2 sentences, if Nigeria is able to refine its oil, there will be no opportunities for ships to move in the high seas, claiming they're importing fuel, which is how some of them get siphoned out. There will be no opportunities for people to monopolize the industry, like pushing an idea that you need a private entrepreneur like Dangote to be able to build a refinery. So the ability of stifling this refinery allows opportunities for corruption to take place, which is what I was expecting to break down a little bit more.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dominic. For those who are sending questions, it's unfortunate we can't continue. We can't take the questions, but I thank everybody that watched. I will give opportunity for Farouk and Sanala to make the final comments. Okay, start. You're muted.
Okay, yes. Well, it's been such a delight. It's been fascinating to be part of this conversation today. I think that it opens up a vista to what is possible in future. And I hope that Nigerians in future elections will demand that their political candidates at all levels submit themselves to debates, because debates are clarifying. I think that I was surprised in so many different ways listening to the 3 candidates who showed up today. It actually made me a lot excited about the prospects of our country. You see that there are actually people who are capable of exercising their mind and the imagination. And so the country is in a good place. Sadly, some of those who are, as Dr. Dominic said, who are leading candidates do not exemplify this tradition of eloquence, of vision, of imagination. But it's hopefully Nigerians are paying attention. I hope Nigerians become less innocent in the way that they make their political choices. You would not, if you had a small business, even a small business, just blindly give it to somebody who is able to dance or who says a pat phrase like "I'll move your company forward." And so a nation, a country is far more complex than any business, particular business. So we should not be indifferent. We should not be blind in the way that we make our political choices. And somebody had asked a question whether I was on Twitter. Indeed, I am, with my name at OK Ndibe. So you can follow me there. I write a column that comes out more or less weekly, Nigerian politics and other issues. So it's been such a delight. And thank you, Rudolph, for the opportunity. And thank you. Somebody had called me a master. I want to be on record to say that I've always told Sonala Olumese that he's actually the master. I began to read Sonala from when I was in secondary school in Nigeria. And a lot of the intricacies of writing, of analysis, I learned from him, and I continue to learn from him. And thank you for your grace and your integrity and credibility. And Farouk has come up and has become a force of nature in the country. Again, exemplifying integrity, exemplifying that the kind of mettle that we need in the country in taking ethical positions on issues in our country. So Farouk, I'm a big fan of yours, and it's been such a delight to co-moderate with both of you. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Farouk, you're next.
Oh my gosh! Well, what do you say after this magisterial ending by Professor OK Ndibe? I mean, it's a joy, it's a delight that I have the privilege to be on the same space with these great names. Just like OK Ndibe had said, I first read Sonala in my high school English essays, and one of the essays we read, I don't remember what it was, and I reached out to him and talked. He doesn't even remember. I think it was one of the comprehension passages where they will isolate phrases and words, and you answer questions, and for some reason I thought this was a writer who had long departed. You know, I didn't think he was still. So when I started reading him, I was like, is it the same? So I had to go back to the high school textbook, and I realized that he was the same person.
Yeah.
But he started writing really early, you know, in his career. So when I told him that, when I read those essays, I thought this was, you know, in America they talk about the dead white man. So I thought it was some dead, you know, right Nigerian. Right? So you are still around. He said, well, I started really early. That's what explains it. So it's you can imagine the honor that it's been of my life to have the privilege to interact with him, both outside of this debate and in here. And OK Ndibe too is one whose prose, you know, who the beauty, the mellifluous flow of his prose, you know, has preceded him. And you know, anyone who reads Nigerian newspapers, you know, reads OK not just for the content but for the beauty of his prose. So I recall someone saying he both attracts and distracts you. He attracts you by the content of his writing and distracts you by the beauty of his prose. So you don't know where to go. Should I concentrate on the content, or is it the stylistic beauty of his presentation? So to be here along with them is a privilege that I don't take lightly. This is a great platform, and I hope that we can make this happen for subsequent elections or subsequent national events that happen. It's not just when elections happen that we should have debates. I think we should institutionalize this and ensure that, you know, at specific periods in the history of our nation, we pause and ask questions to people who make policies and invite the input of everyday people in this discussion. And Rudolph Okonkwo has, you know, of course, everyone knows him. It's the rightness and richness of his sense of humor. You know, it's one that you know we are blessed to have. And thanks for making this possible, and for bringing these sages together, and bringing small fry like me to be in the midst of these greats. Thank you so much, and I hope that this continues.
Thank you. Now we will listen to the great Sonala.
Thank you very much. I'm humbled. I really want to thank those people who couldn't join us in the studio, who wanted to run comments or ask questions, but who could not get in. I didn't know that 3 hours would wind up being as short as it turned out to be. When Rudolph first proposed 3 hours, I think I screamed. But what has happened here today has really lifted my spirits, not just about the elections next weekend, but about Nigeria. I saw one of Farouk's children in the background come in, and I think he asked the young girl, I said, let her stay. I said, because this really is about the next generation.
Yeah.
You know, this is, and for Farouk himself, he will tell, I've told him that before Nigeria is through with him, he will become a philosopher. But let the wisdom that we each gain uplift not just ourselves, but our country. Many of us who are on this platform today are outside the country. I think somebody asked Farouk earlier today whether he will be going back to Nigeria or he can go back to Nigeria. I was going to answer the question by saying, ask OK in Ndibe, because almost every time he comes there, they hold him somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
Still, we are the lucky ones.
Mm-hmm.
We are alive. You can only be hopeful if you are alive.
Mm-hmm.
You can work, you can pray, you can hope that tomorrow improves. I'm happy for the presidential candidates that we had here today. I'm sure that 4 years from now, far more presidential candidates will show up for debates than we've had this year.
Mm-hmm.
Because of some of these efforts,
Mm-hmm.
we must not give up.
Mm-hmm.
The country is ours, not theirs.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Wow.
All right, thank you so much, Sanana. Let me let me begin by saying I want to thank everybody that watched us today. I appreciate all of you. I want to thank our media partners. I had the opportunity of talking to several editors. It's been a long time I practiced journalism in Nigeria directly, but I got a chance to talk to them and understand the issues and establish relationships with them. And I hope we are going to continue to work together and bring important conversations to Nigerians as we go along. This is not going to be an election thing. We are going to make this as frequent as possible. I want to thank the people who helped me behind the scene. The technical part of this, there are a lot of people who helped me. One of them is Sekena Awuzie. I want to thank you for all your help. And my editors and people who helped to design things. I want to also thank some people who supported this. Osiabo, Dr. Osiabo helped a lot in helping me connect to editors and other people, John Wabeze and Pius Ayawale. But most importantly, I want to thank Professor Ken Ndibe, Farouk Parogi, and Sonamba. It's like a dream. If you ask me, go to a candy shop and choose anybody you want. And I chose them and they all agreed. And it's not, it's not an easy thing. I appreciate you guys. Eso, for those who do not know, we call him Eso, and you don't call him that. He wrote a book I read, I read in secondary school. Most of you may not know that he wrote it. No Second Chance. By Longman. If you tell me that I will meet the author, just like Farouk said, and when I found out that he was the one, I really appreciate you and your contribution to journalism in Nigeria. Okay, it's the same thing, of course, okay, it's my right-hand man. Anywhere I go, he's the reason why I'm there. Farouk, of course, he's been...
Rudolph,
yeah.
Rudolph, your wife is my right-hand woman. I'm your friend only because your wife makes the best bitter leaf soup. Yes. True confession.
Now, Farouk, you have, the Supreme Court is looking for Farouk. You get to the point where the Supreme Court is responding to you. Farouk, you are very important to us, and I appreciate the fact that you are part of this conversation. and so many other people, including this Dr. Dominic that you guys are seeing. He's like my assistant now. If I'm not here, he takes over the show. So I thank everybody. H-Show, I thank you. Ovie, thank you so much for joining us. Ike, thank you. Dr. Danladi, thank you. And all the people who sent questions, I appreciate everybody. And I will see you guys next time. And let me just assure you that we are going to make this kind of a formal organization or institution, and at least once every 3 months, we have a debate on a major issue facing the country. So on behalf of everybody, I thank you all for joining us, and I will see you next time.
Special greeting from the incoming president, Dr. Rabi Musa Kwankwaso.
All right. All right. By the way, of course, if our candidates are watching, we thank them. Those that came, I really about those that came.
You will thank my pikin very well. Not to say shy and he still honor us.
And Kachuku and Prince George, we thank them so much. Thank you all.
Kwankwaso, it appeared that you misunderstood what I said about Kwankwaso. I was talking about his interview with Ruben Abati, not his appearance at Chatham House. So if you check my blog, you'll find where I wrote about the interview he had with Ruben Abati. So these are completely different issues, but thank you.
I'm sorry thank you for the correction.
All right.
Thank you all.
I'll see you.
That lad has become Kwankwaso after winning mobile yesterday. See you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay.
Oh, lovely.
Okay. My computer doesn't want to end.